Chapter 3047. 3047 Getting Information. Chapter 3047. 3047 Getting Information. 3047 Getting Information. The world's will of the Genesis world of the last era seems to have communicated with you before, right? Ling Han said, I want to know, what did it say to you? The expressions of the 5 ultimate elites changed at the same time. This was their greatest secret. Humph, don't even think about finding out. Chongyan immediately said, so what if they would be suppressed beneath the lavatory? Ling Han would have to stand there and constantly instill his power at all times. Otherwise, how could he possibly keep them trapped there? However, in comparison, they were even more unwilling to reveal the secrets in their hearts. Once Ling Han also participated in the competition, would they still be able to obtain that opportunity? Ling Han shifted his butt and sat down more comfortably. There's no point in you guys trying to hide it. After all, I've also come in contact with that world's will. What? The expressions of Chongyan and the others clearly changed, but it was impossible for an ultimate elite of the 7th tier not to have some shrewdness, so they were all very calm. Ling Han continued to probe. If he wanted someone to reveal their secrets, he would have to reveal some information first. Not only did I come into contact with the world's will, but I also chatted with it for a while. Moreover, it also allowed me to see a scene where many marks of life were planted in your bodies, he said indifferently. He stopped and quietly observed the expressions of Chongyan and the others. As expected, the expressions of these 5 people changed again. So what? Heavenly Venerate Big Dipper also said indifferently, as if he didn't care at all. Ling Han shook his head and said, you guys really aren't cooperating. But it doesn't matter. I'm a person who likes guessing the most. He revealed a contemplative look and said, you guys are already at the peak of the 7th tier, so there shouldn't be many things that could move you. First, an increase in strength. Second, a threat to your life. Theoretically, you can't advance any further. Furthermore, you're immortal and indestructible. Hence, it couldn't be these. However, back then, when Heavenly Venerate Yellow Sand was being killed, extermination was also torn into pieces. This proves that even the immortality of an ultimate elite of the 7th tier has a prerequisite if hysteria really devours the Genesis world. It will be difficult for you all to escape misfortune. However, this raises another question. Since your lives are also in danger, why did you escape from the realm battlefield? This brings us back to the original topic. Perhaps your strength can still increase, allowing you to avoid such a threat. Ling Han's words were slightly ambiguous, but the logic was very clear. Therefore, although there was no substantial information revealed, Chongyan and the others' expressions continued to change. If this continued, it was very likely that Ling Han would really be able to guess what it was. Ling Han glanced at these 5 people and decided to drop a heavy bomb. World's core. What? All of a sudden, Chongyan and the others could no longer maintain their composure. They all blurted out, and their expressions were filled with disbelief as they looked at Ling Han. How could Ling Han have known such a secret? Ling Han laughed loudly and said, how about it? Let's have everyone be transparent and honest, so we can have a nice conversation, all right? Chongyan and the others were sly old foxes after all, so they quickly calmed down. Tell me first, how many secrets do you know about the world's core? Chongyan asked. Fuck, how could he have known that the worlds will had just let the word slip? Ling Han naturally wouldn't admit it and said, how much do you know? Don't try to get information out of me when you don't know anything. Since that's the case, there's nothing to talk about. How could Chongyan and the others fall for it? All of them were very tight-lipped. You're not going to tell me, are you? Ling Han smiled faintly. Do you want to be suppressed beneath the lavatory for 10,000 years? Ha. In any case, we're immortal and indestructible, unaffected by all techniques, so where wouldn't we be transcendent? Heavenly Venerate, Big Dipper, laughed coldly. Ling Han frowned inwardly. It seemed that he could only humiliate these 5 old bastards now, but it was still a little lacking if he wanted them to truly be afraid. Unless he advanced to the 7th tier, cultivated a transcendent dimension in his body, and possessed the ability to kill 7th tiers, at which point he believed one of these 5 people would definitely submit. Forget it. I can't be bothered to play with you guys anymore. Ling Han shook his head, grabbed the 5 ultimate elites, and flew toward the realm battlefield. This time, he would send the 5 of them to the battlefield together. In just over 10 days, Ling Han arrived at the place. With a wave of his hand, he tossed the 5 ultimate elites into the passageway of the main battlefield. Do what you should do. If I catch you outside, you'll really have to be prepared to stay beneath the lavatory for 10,000 years. Ling Han said coldly. Chongyan and the others were all staring at him. Their hearts were boiling with rage, but what could they do? Their ability was lacking. Forget it. The 5 of them turned around and walked into the depths of the main battlefield. When they came within the sight of Lin Luo and the others, it naturally caused them to be surprised. What was going on? Why were these 5 people here again? Especially Shatter Mountains. Didn't he run away last time? Why did he come back? The 5 ultimate elites were naturally too embarrassed to explain, and they immediately joined the fray to vent their anger on Hysteria. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then walked into the passageway of the secondary battlefield. It had been a long time since he left the realm battlefield. It was time for him to take a look. Moreover, there were some old scores that had yet to be settled. When he arrived at the front line, he happened to encounter an attack from the Hysteria's army. It was a black mass that seemed to be able to topple mountains and overturn seas. On the profound negative realm side, everyone was extremely nervous. Hysteria's army was getting stronger and stronger, while their numbers were decreasing. How could they go on like this? After this battle, how many people would never live to see the next day? Pum! Right at this moment, they saw a beam of light shooting over from afar. It streaked across the top of the city wall, and then disappeared in the midst of Hysteria's army. A scene that made their scalps tingle appeared. As the brilliance of light flashed, the troops of Hysteria's army exploded one after another, turning into a rain of blood. It had to be known that the composition of the Hysteria's army was extremely complicated. From pseudo-heavenly venerable tier to the 6th tier, wherever the brilliance flashed, be it a pseudo-heavenly venerate or a 6th tier, they all turned into a rain of blood. With just one strike, the entire army of Hysteria could be said to have been wiped out. There were only a dozen or so individuals left. Which big shot made such a move? Wasn't that too terrifying? They all looked into the distance and saw a young man walking over from the sky. His slender body seemed to contain a mighty power that could suppress the universe, making people want to worship him. That's Ling Han. He's back. Everyone was both excited and terrified. Back then, Ling Han had wiped out 90% of the Hysteria's army with a single strike. Now that the king had returned, his abilities had risen to a whole new level. With a single strike, he had wiped the enemies out entirely. Having such a helper was naturally exciting, but at the same time it was also terrifying. He was too powerful. Was there anyone who could keep him in check? However, more people still harbored optimistic thoughts. Previously, Ling Han had been forced to leave by Chongyan's group of 5, and he was still able to return now. With the presence of such relations, how could he possibly harm others? Chapter 3048, 3048 Putting on an Act. Chapter 3048, 3048 Putting on an Act. 3048 Putting on an Act. Brotherling, long time no see. Lin Yulian was the first to greet him. Brother Ling. Wu Haoyang also nodded. In the face of Ling Han's invincible battle prowess, he had no choice but to address him as Brother Ling. Big brother. Bai Maifin jumped up, intending to hug Ling Han. Go away, isn't this disgusting? Ling Han hurriedly pushed him away. Xian Qihu, on the other hand, did not speak. He only looked at Ling Han. Ling Han also looked over, and his eyes flashed in anger. Sick tiger, today we'll settle the score between us. Is there any debt between us? Xian Qihu pretended to be surprised and then nodded. That's true. It's time to return the favor you owe me. Ling Han's gaze turned cold. Was this guy even more shameless than him? Brother Ling, you do have to thank Brother Xian, Lin Yulian said. What did this mean? Ling Han looked towards Lin Yulian. When it came to the Lin clan, he had always harbored an extremely favorable impression and gratitude. If not for the Lin clan repeatedly helping him back then, perhaps he would not have been able to live to this day. At the very least, it would have been impossible for him to possess battle prowess that surpassed the peak stage of the 7th tier so quickly. Therefore, he was willing to listen to Lin Yulian. I only found out not too long ago. Lin Yulian smiled apologetically at Ling Han and said, the reason why Brother Xian has been targeting Brother Ling was actually because of my father and the other ultimate elite's arrangements. Why? Ling Han asked in a low voice. Because for a prodigy like Brother Ling, only by giving you enough pressure would you be able to work hard and maintain motivation at all times, Lin Yulian said. Ling Han was astounded. Was that really the case? Brother Ling, think about it carefully. Although Brother Xian has repeatedly pressured you, has there ever been a time when you fell into a desperate situation? Lin Yulian continued. Ling Han thought to himself. In terms of Xian Qihu's oppression of him, it was naturally the time when, at the beginning, he had been asked to carry out the raids behind enemy lines. However, because he had mastered the ability to travel between dimensions, this mission was obviously a close call. It was only because he had Hysteria's subordinates spying on him that he was almost killed by Hysteria. You have to know that when Chong Yan and the others ruled that you were a traitor, Lord Xian Fu voted against it, Lin Yulian said as she continued to clear Xian Qihu's name. Indeed, Xian Qihu's actions were a little contradictory. Previously, when Ling Han and Feng Wuding had been fighting fiercely, he had given up on defense and allowed others to bombard him. Even Xian Qihu had shifted his attack. Otherwise, even if he had killed Ling Han at that time, he could still have said that he had been unable to stop in time. No. Ling Han then looked at Xian Qihu. The first time you fought with me, you were indeed filled with killing intent. That was absolutely not an act. Xian Qihu smiled lightly. At that time, I did want to kill you. It was precisely because of this matter that Lord Lin Luo came to me and asked if I was willing to help carry out this plan. I agreed to it. However, I've also told Lord Lin that if I participated, I wouldn't go easy on you. When it was time to attack, I wouldn't show mercy. Otherwise, what kind of trash would I train? If he couldn't even compare to me, Xian Qihu, what right would he have to save the Genesis world? He crossed his arms, looking very proud. Ling Han didn't say anything else. In truth, he believed it in his heart. This was the only explanation for the Xian clan's incomparably contradictory position. Furthermore, it was indeed because of Xian Qihu that Ling Han had accumulated endless motivation. Otherwise, his cultivation level would not have advanced so quickly. However, Xian Qihu's current appearance was too cocky. I don't believe you, Ling Han said coldly. Boom, he released an endless aura, and even more so, a baleful killing intent that was almost tangible, causing pain to spread throughout other people's bodies. One had to know that the people here were all heavenly venerates, and even they felt as if their entire bodies were being sliced by blades. It could be seen just how powerful Ling Han was, and just how intense his killing intent was. Xian Qihu's expression also changed. Although he possessed 7th tier battle prowess, he was not an ultimate elite of 7th tier, and his physique had not reached the level of indestructibility. If Feng Wuding died, so would he. Ling Han, At this point, I have no reason to lie to you, he said loudly. I don't care if you're lying to me or not. Since you've made me unhappy, you'll have to bear the consequences. Ling Han charged out. Peng, his speed was too fast, and the space behind him instantly exploded. He instantly appeared in front of Xian Chihu and punched him. Peng! Xian Chihu was instantly sent flying. So what if he had 7th tier battle prowess? He had yet to reach the peak stage of the 7th tier. Moreover, so what even if he reached the peak stage of the 7th tier? Even someone as powerful as Chong Yan and the others had been single-handedly suppressed by Ling Han. Ling Han chased after him, and his killing intent materialized. He extended his right hand again, and boundless power condensed, turning into a long sword that stabbed toward Xian Chihu. Xian Chihu turned pale with fright. This attack, he could not block it. Despite not being able to, he still had to block it. Otherwise, he would die. He roared and attacked with all his might. He used whatever secret techniques and heavenly venerable seals he had, regardless of the consequences. If he lost his life, everything would be over. Lin Yolian, Wu Haoyang, and Bai Maifin also hurriedly made their moves, attacking Ling Han in an attempt to stop him from killing. Unfortunately, even back when Ling Han was still a 5th tier, he could allow them to bombard him without getting injured, let alone now. Within the same cultivation level, who could be a match against Ling Han? No matter how freakish he was, it was impossible. Peng, 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 the attacks landed on Ling Han's body and bounced back one after another, completely ineffective. Meanwhile, Ling Han merely shook the power of his fist, and Xian Chihu's defense was like ice and snow meeting boiling water, immediately disintegrating. Shwa, the sword struck. Xian Chihu couldn't help but close his eyes. In that short instant, countless thoughts surfaced in his mind. In the end, it turned into a bitter smile. Hey, why didn't he feel the pain he had imagined? Xian Chihu couldn't help but open his eyes, only to see Ling Han smiling at him. Meanwhile, the long sword condensed from fundamental power had long since disappeared. Fuck, are you playing the fool with me? Since you've put on an act to trick me, I'll have to trick you once as well. Only then will I be able to call it even, Ling Han said calmly. Xian Chihu couldn't help but feel gloomy. How could Ling Han's acting be so realistic? He really thought that he was going to die just now. Lin Yulian and the other two also heaved a sigh of relief. They were really afraid that Ling Han would kill Xian Chihu. If that happened, who knew how berserk Xian Fu would become? Peng! Right at this moment, Ling Han suddenly threw a punch, and it landed on Xian Chihu's nose. Even with Xian Chihu's physique, he still couldn't withstand it, and blood instantly flowed from his nose. He looked at Ling Han in surprise, his face full of innocence. What was going on? Since you admit that you wanted to kill me the first time, how can I vent my anger if I don't beat you up? Ling Han said as he punched out repeatedly, under the suppression of his strength. Xian Chihu simply had no power to retaliate and could only get beaten up. Lin Yulian and the other two wanted to dissuade Ling Han, but after thinking about it, they still didn't make a move. In any case, Ling Han wouldn't kill anyone, so let him vent his anger. Chapter 3049, 3049 Entering Hysteria's World. Chapter 3049, 3049 Entering Hysteria's World. 3049 Entering Hysteria's World. Ling Han was dishing out a beatdown. Even though he managed to prove that Xian Chihu had been pretending this whole time, the latter only had himself to blame for harboring thoughts of killing Ling Han to begin with. What was more important was that the guy had a face that just deserved to be beaten up. After venting his frustration, Ling Han finally stopped, smiling with satisfaction. So what if he was a 6th tier? Xian Chihu was still beaten to a bloody pulp. His face was absolutely horrendous. Ling Han! Xian Chihu yelled. Ling Han glared. Say my name one more time, and I will beat you up for another hour. Do you believe me? Xian Chihu had no choice but to fall silent. After all, Ling Han possessed great power now and could easily torment him. Although his life wasn't being threatened anymore, he still wanted to hold on to his pride. All right, that's enough. Come, let us have a drink. Bai Maifin quickly conciliated both parties. The 5 prodigies had gathered together for drinks and chatted with glee. Naturally, Xian Chihu was unable to enjoy himself as much, constantly touching his cheeks and grimacing in pain. Ling Han, you've finally broken through to the 6th tier. What tremendous battle prowess, Lin Yulian mused. Back then, she had still been able to help Ling Han resolve a big problem, but not even 10 of her would be a match for Ling Han now. Moreover, she possessed the battle prowess of the middle stage of the 7th tier. However, this was her limit as a 6th tier. Unless she was able to break through to the 7th tier, her battle prowess would not increase any further. The higher the cultivation level, the more difficult it was to battle against someone beyond one's level. This was especially true for those in the 6th and 7th tier. How strong are you now exactly? Wu Haoying asked. Back then, he had had a sense of rivalry with Ling Han, but he knew that Ling Han had far surpassed him now. Ling Han said modestly, just a little stronger than your normal 7th tier. Xian Chihu gritted his teeth in vexation. How could Ling Han be just a little stronger? Xian Chihu was a victim of Ling Han's violence and had personally experienced the latter's strength. Ling Han was practically a monster. Brother Ling, what do you plan to do next? Lin Yulian asked solemnly. Brother, are you going to guard this position? Bai Maifin was also curious. Ling Han pondered for a bit and then shook his head. It would be a waste for him to just guard this spot. With him around, the defenses in the area definitely could not be breached. However, the crux of the war was on the main battlefield. If they were to fall on the main battlefield, what use would there be to protect this place? I want to head into Hysteria's depths from here, Ling Han said. What? The 4 prodigies were shocked. This was such a crazy idea. That was Hysteria's territory. Once they entered there, they would no longer be able to extract the powers of dimension, causing their strength to fall. Going there was certain death for anyone other than the immortal 7th tiers. They admitted that Ling Han was very powerful, enough to go toe-to-toe with some of the older generation's 7th tiers, or even surpass them. However, when it came to fighting against Hysteria, no one believed he could do it, no matter how monstrous he was. He needed to at least reach the 7th tier. That was because Hysteria was also an overwhelmingly powerful monster itself. Brother Ling, you shouldn't be hasty. Lin Yulian tried to dissuade him. That's right, brother. You need to think this through, Bai Maifin chimed in. Ling Han smiled. Don't worry. Hysteria won't kill me that easily. His powers of dimension had coalesced into a single force, and he didn't need to rely on the profound negative realm anymore. No matter where he battled, he would not suffer a reduction in strength. As such, he dared to venture into Hysteria's territory and have a look for himself at the monstrous being that formed its body into a whole dimension. Lin Yulian and Bai Maifin still tried to dissuade Ling Han, and even Xian Chihu was giving him a stern warning while pinching his nose. However, Ling Han had already made up his mind. He continued on his path alone and walked towards the distance. Everyone watched him leave from atop the city walls, feeling both a sense of worry and excitement in their hearts. They were worried because Hysteria was too powerful. It was undoubtedly the strongest existence alive. Meanwhile, Ling Han was not a true 7th tier, and without true immortality, there would always be a sense of fear when facing Hysteria. On the other hand, they were excited because they had always been oppressed by Hysteria, and now was their chance to strike back. Ling Han left as though drifted by the wind, but would he ever return? With great strides, he stepped forward, full of confidence. One step followed another, and despite not looking like he was going very fast, each step he took transcended millions and millions of miles. In less than half a day, he found himself entering a strange and colorful world. This place was covered in darkness. He felt as though he had entered a giant bug's nest. The ground beneath him was uneven with many holes, and so was the case for the ceiling and the walls surrounding him. This place was deathly silent, without any sense of life at all. There were no living creatures or plants. It just seemed like a desolate wasteland. However, Ling Han doubted that was actually the case. If this place was as desolate as it looked, then it could not be called a dimension. After a short journey, he finally noticed a different scenery. There was a plant, or something that looked like a plant. It was over 300 meters tall and was completely black. It had leaves, but they were in the shape of different weapons, giving the plant a very peculiar look. There were also giant fruits about 3 meters in length and 2 meters in width. They dangled from various branches on the plant. "What is this? A celestial fruit?" Ling Han approached, channeling his protective technique in the meanwhile. 4 orbs of light surrounded him, forming a barrier in the shape of a tetrahedron, and effectively shielding Ling Han from all manners of attack. He then reached out and pressed on one of the fruits. Bo! The shell of the fruit pulsated slightly. Ling Han was surprised. He couldn't understand what was happening. Using his finger like a knife, he slashed across the fruit, ripping it open instantly. A large amount of fluid oozed out, and then something about 30 centimeters tall suddenly charged out. Ling Han couldn't help raising an eyebrow. This was one of the early forms for Hysteria's monsters. Evidently, the creature was still very young. Its strength had only reached the 3rd heaven of the celestial king tier, but it was already full of malice, biting at Ling Han ferociously. "Pa!" Ling Han casually stomped it to death. There was no blood rain from the skies. It seemed like the heavens didn't care about this life. That was understandable. This dimension was Hysteria's true body, and these creatures were its soldiers. Why would it mourn if only one of them had died? Ling Han took another look around his surroundings. There were countless plants in the area. Some looked similar to the one before him, while others were like vines. They stretched over the wall, their fruits dangling down from above. There were countless numbers of these fruits before Ling Han's eyes. Was this the place where Hysteria produced its massive army? They were not born out of thin air, but birthed in such a way. Ling Han scoffed and swiped the air with his finger, his powerful sword chi lashing out. Pa, pa, pa! He cut down a great number of these plants. He also imbued his sword chi with karmic flames, burning all the plants to ashes. The fruits naturally could not escape their fate, either. The sword chi was so powerful that it instantly killed many of the monsters inside the fruits. There were some that managed to escape being cut, but they would soon burn to ashes under the unending flames of tribulation. Chi! A loud screech resounded as monsters started popping out from the holes on the ground and the sky. These were clearly the adult forms of the monsters. They had all reached the heavenly venerable tier and emitted a powerful aura. As it turned out, once they emerged from the fruit, they would bury themselves in holes. As soon as Hysteria gave the command, they would simultaneously move out. Chapter 3050, 3050 Getting Information. Chapter 3050, 3050 Getting Information. 3050 Getting Information. If Hysteria didn't appear, then no matter how many monsters came, it would still be useless. Ling Han attacked to his heart's content. This was not the profound negative realm, and he was not at all worried that the battle would be too intense and destroy the profound negative realm. Hysteria was the one who was going to be destroyed. With Ling Han's current strength, which other monster could withstand his attack? With a single punch, they were all destroyed. He was wreaking havoc. This should be able to have some effect on Hysteria. Even if it was only a negligible effect, it should be able to reduce the pressure on Lin Luo and the others in the main battlefield. Ling Han let out a long howl and transformed into a long dragon as he charged forward, destroying everything he saw. Up in the sky, he dismantled the walls of the cave, only to discover to his surprise that he had actually entered another cave after blasting the walls to a certain extent. Similarly, the ground beneath his feet was uneven, and there were holes everywhere. It was the same above his head, which was covered with plants with huge fruits hanging from them. It was the same down below. It was as if the entire dimension was Hysteria's military factory. Ling Han attacked to his heart's content. His battle prowess had already far surpassed a normal peak stage 7th tiers. So how terrifying was his destructive power? With a single strike, the heavens and earth would collapse. However, this was both a dimension and Hysteria's body at the same time, and its sturdiness far exceeded that of the profound negative realm and the flaming frost realm of before. Even if Ling Han attacked with all his might, that attack could only destroy a mountain. If they were in the profound negative realm, Ling Han's attack would definitely have a great power capable of destroying hundreds of millions of mountains. The ground here was as tough as devouring metal at the level of great accomplishment. No, it should be said that it was very similar to the materials used to build the city walls of the realm battlefield. Even 6th-tier elites would find it very difficult to break through it. Even with Ling Han's battle prowess, the destruction he could cause was still limited. However, Ling Han was extremely satisfied, because Hysteria had manifested as a dimension and was already at the 7th tier. This meant that he shouldn't have been able to damage this place at all. But now he could do it. What did this mean? Hysteria had manifested as a dimension, but a dimension was too big, causing its power to be dispersed and thus affecting its defense. It couldn't reach the level of indestructibility that a 7th tier ought to attain. Or perhaps Hysteria hadn't completely manifested as a dimension, and its true body or core was still hidden in some corner. Therefore, indestructibility was only applicable to that part. Which one was it? Perhaps both of these two guesses were wrong. Ling Han didn't mind. Since he could damage this place now, what was there to be polite about? Die. He unleashed the power in his body. It was endless, and the 5 fundamental powers could be continuously absorbed. Even if this was Hysteria's territory and he might be targeted, Ling Han could still communicate with the void, where the fundamental power was even more abundant. The power of dimension in his body was endless, and it was being generated at every moment. If he didn't use it, it would increase the strength of his dimensions, and he similarly wouldn't have to worry about running out of energy. Where was Hysteria? Why hadn't it appeared yet? Was it just going to watch helplessly as its creations were destroyed? Ordinary monsters were fine, but there were also those mother trees that could nurture monsters. Ling Han believed that these were treasures that Hysteria needed to value. The monster army was also coming out of the holes in the cave walls, continuously, like a swarm of ants. However, what was the use of having more monsters? Ling Han only needed to exert his power, and the monsters would fall one by one, as if he was harvesting wheat. The self-destructing monsters had also appeared, but even if a monster with 7th-tier battle prowess exploded around Ling Han, it would be useless. His defense was more than 100 times stronger than when he had been at the 5th tier, wasn't it? Otherwise, why would he dare to come to Hysteria's territory alone? Why do you want to go against me? A voice suddenly sounded in Ling Han's mind, and it was slightly sluggish, as if it had not spoken for too long. Hysteria. Was it finally unable to sit still? Ling Han laughed loudly and similarly released his divine sense, and said, "You and I are on different sides. Is there a need for other reasons? I single-handedly created you. In the words of humans, you are betraying me." Hysteria's voice sounded again. Ling Han sneered and said, "You're not a human, so cut the crap. Besides, you only chose me, and it is not that you created me. Don't be greedy for credit. Let me ask you, did you choose me because there's a light spot in my mind?" Hysteria's voice did not immediately resound. After a long while it said, "You can actually discover the secret in your body." Although it did not give a direct answer, this was equivalent to admitting that Hysteria did indeed know that there was that light spot in Ling Han's mind. Ling Han couldn't help but start thinking. He had been chosen by Hysteria because of the speck of light in his body. But what about the so-called world's will? Was this light spot credited to it, or had it been attracted by it? Ling Han did not think too deeply into it. He continued to try to get information out of Hysteria. As an existence that had lived since the Genesis world of the last era and had always played the role of the greatest villain, Hysteria definitely knew a lot of secrets. You should know that your clone from the previous generation has appeared again. Boom, boom, boom. Loud sounds could be heard from all directions. Hysteria might be mobilizing troops, but Ling Han did not care. He wanted to confirm some of his guesses through Hysteria. So what? It's just my previous body that I have shed in my last life. In this life, I'm even stronger, Hysteria said in a cold voice. But don't you want to know who incited the revival of your previous life? Ling Han asked with a smile. Hysteria paused for a moment before asking, "Who is it?" Ling Han laughed and said, "Let's trade. Tell me, what is the world's core?" "World's core?" Hysteria repeated in confusion. "What is this?" Hysteria actually didn't know what the world's core was. That shouldn't be the case. After all, since the dimensional core was the core of a dimension, the world's core should be the core of the Genesis world. The dimensional core allowed 10,000 shadows and golden silk moth to break through to the 7th tier, allowing him to advance to the 5th tier as well, gaining 7th tier battle prowess. In that case, could he come up with this deduction a world's core granted the possibility for a 7th tier to advance into 8th tier? It was precisely because of this that Chong Yen and the others were so concerned. But now Hysteria actually said that it didn't know what the world's core was. Did it really not know, or was it deliberately hiding the fact that it did? Ling Han made a judgment internally, but the information he obtained was really too little. He only knew the phrase world's core. So what could he use as a basis for his judgments? The world's core is such an important thing, and you actually don't know about it? Ling Han said deliberately, "Those few old enemies of yours like Chong Yen, Shatter Mountains, and the others are all scheming for this thing." Hysteria hesitated. Although it had taken the form of a dimension, its intelligence was not inferior at all. The sudden withdrawal of Chong Yan's group from the realm battlefield didn't make sense to it. There had to be some kind of conspiracy behind it. Thus, upon being mentioned by Ling Han, its suspicion instantly intensified. What exactly was this world's core? Chong Yen and the others left for this thing. Chapter 3051. 3051 Frog at the Bottom of a Well. Chapter 3051. 3051 Frog at the Bottom of a Well. 3051 Frog at the Bottom of a Well. Humph, you're messing with my mind. Hysteria was no longer in deep thought. Once I capture you, I'll be able to obtain all of your secrets. Boom! The cave wall broke open, and an army charged in. Hysteria, do you think this kind of trash can stop me? Ling Han said with a smile. Although this was an army of 6 tiers, in front of him, what was it worth? You will find out, Hysteria said calmly. When it came to patience, it was definitely superior to anyone else in the world. It had lived through 2 generations of the Genesis world. Its lifespan was too long. Hysteria's army didn't attack immediately. Those 6th-tier elites were actually combining together, 2 of them merging into one, then merging again and again. Their numbers were decreasing, but the aura emitted by each of them was getting stronger and stronger. It looked like they were intending to break through to the 7th tier. Even if it was Hysteria, it had its limitations. It could only create 6th-tier life forms and could not touch the 7th tier. However, it had allowed its subordinates to possess 7th-tier battle prowess through another method. They fused together. Ling Han had seen this a long time ago, but this kind of fusion had a fatal weakness, and that was stability. It wouldn't last for long, at most 3 days, and the body would explode due to the terrifying power it contained. Ling Han was unafraid. Firstly, his strength far surpassed ordinary 7th tiers. Secondly, this kind of 7th tier that was formed from fusion probably only had 7th tier battle prowess, while the physique was far from reaching the 7th tier. This was nothing to worry about at all. Ling Han still stuck with his words. As long as hysteria didn't appear, he wasn't afraid of anyone. Very quickly, 7 fusion monsters were fully formed, emitting the aura of the 7th tier. In addition, there were even more monsters fusing together, wanting to create even more 7th tiers. Ling Han stood with his hands behind his back and said, "Hysteria, let's talk seriously again. Don't you think that being invincible is a very boring thing? You have something to do now. But so what if I really let you devour the Genesis world? How lonely would you be? Foolish ant, you didn't jump out of that well. So how do you know how big the world is?" Hysteria said, coldly, what does that mean?" Ling Han's heart skipped a beat, and he said, "You mean you jumped out of this well and saw an even more exciting world? Do you think I'll tell you?" Hysteria sneered. "Tell me about it. I think you've been holding it in for so long, so you should really want to share it with someone, right?" Ling Han said with a smile, "If you can tell me about it, I can also tell you the secret of the reappearance of your predecessor." "There's no need." Hysteria said coldly, "I'm invincible in the world. No secret can affect me." Damn, it was really not easy to deceive. Ling Han sighed and could only give up on the idea of getting information from Hysteria. With a long howl, he punched out, launching an attack towards Hysteria's army. At this moment, 9 fusion monsters had already formed, which meant that there were 9 beings with 7th tier battle prowess, and they all charged towards Ling Han. Boom! A huge battle broke out between the 2 sides. Ling Han was completely unafraid. There was a defensive light shield surrounding him, and if his body wasn't damaged, then power that suppressed the 7th tier erupted when he punched out. Boom! A 7th tier monster's chest was instantly blasted through by him, but a terrifying light burst forth from its chest, forming a huge explosion. The force of the explosion was truly terrifying. Ling Han was sent flying by the impact, and he crashed heavily into the wall of the cave, directly shattering it. His figure traveled backward repeatedly, and it was only when he crashed through 3 layers of the cave wall that the force of the impact finally receded. Ling Han gritted his teeth, and the defense on his body was actually directly reduced by as much as 33 layers. It had to be known that although this was still the same total of 100 layers, the defense of each layer was 10 times stronger than when he was at the 5th tier, which was equivalent to having 1,000 layers of defense. Now that the 33 layers had been torn open, this meant that if he had still been in the 5th tier, this attack would at least have heavily injured him, and it wouldn't have been strange for him to even have been directly killed. Thank goodness! Thank goodness! Ling Han nodded in his heart. Fortunately, he hadn't been blinded by his own strength and come here in a moment of hot-headedness when he had only been at the 5th tier. Now, he had nothing to fear from these monsters. With a thought, the defense that had been destroyed was restored to its original state. It was now completely flawless. Die! He charged back, and as he brandished his fists, his terrifying battle prowess seethed. Pung, pung, pung! 3 7th tier fusion monsters exploded together, turning into an energy storm that made it seem like it was the end of the world, sending Ling Han flying again. Impressive! Ling Han was flabbergasted. 3 monsters exploding at the same time shaved off as many as 63 layers of his defenses. How could it be so powerful? He reflected on the situation in his mind and immediately came to a realization. It turned out that there were many explosive monsters among these fusion monsters, and each of them had fused with at least 10 of these monsters. Their power was naturally terrifying. Around him, there were still 6th-tier monsters fusing, but the number of exploding monsters was extremely small. This was very normal. Even if it was hysteria, it should be extremely difficult to create a monster with 7th-tier power. Even if it could unleash a burst of such power only once, it would still break some kind of restriction. So how could it be created on a large scale? However, Ling Han had no intention of continuing the battle. No matter how many of these monsters he eliminated, it would be useless. At most, he would be able to temporarily relieve the pressure on the secondary battlefield. It wouldn't be long before the Hysteria army recovered its scale, and the battle would resume. In that case, I'll destroy as much as I can before leaving. Ling Han charged out, trying his best to avoid the 7th-tier monsters. If he really couldn't avoid them, he would only clash head-on with them. This way, even if he was affected by the shock waves of the explosion, it wouldn't be able to tear through his defenses. Without a true immortal body, he would certainly have some concerns. Ling Han sighed with emotion. He was clearly much stronger than Chong Yen and the others, but he had to be extremely careful when fighting these monsters, unlike Chong Yen and the others, who didn't have to worry about their own safety at all. Pung, pung, pung. The caves here were destroyed one by one. Ling Han's main focus was to destroy those plants. They seemed to be mother trees which could continuously create monsters. Destroying them should be able to greatly slow down Hysteria's invasion. As expected, after he focused his attacks on the plants, Hysteria was clearly enraged. Previously, it had not made a move to deal with Ling Han. It seemed to have been held back by Lin Luo and the others, or perhaps it was for some other reason. However, now it swung out a tentacle, striking towards Ling Han. Pung! Ling Han didn't cower and chose to face it head-on. He wanted to know just how terrifying Hysteria's attack was. With a single strike, he was immediately sent flying, crashing through 9 layers of cave wall before coming to a stop. He took a look and couldn't help but be shocked. There were only 9 layers of defense left on his body. If the power of Hysteria advanced a step further, or if its attacks became more concentrated, Ling Han's defense would still become incomparably weak. With a thought, his defenses were immediately replenished, and it instantly turned from dull to dazzling. I'm done playing. Ling Han's figure flashed. With Hysteria attacking, the situation would be completely different. The strongest in the world was still Hysteria, an unshakable existence. Chapter 3052 3052 Escape. Chapter 3052 3052 Escape. 3052 Escape. Ling Han ran. Hysteria naturally couldn't just stand by and watch as he wreaked havoc. And after wreaking havoc, could he still leave? It immediately whipped out another tentacle. Boom! The tentacle rose into the air with a terrifying might. Ling Han ran as fast as he could. He was not going to fight Hysteria head-on. This was a task with no returns for him, and it would only cause him to fall into a tight encirclement. If he was struck by that 7th-tier fusion monster again, it would really be able to severely injure him. Shwa! The tentacle brushed past Ling Han's back and was just a little bit away from hitting his back. You've entered my territory and you still want to run. Hysteria sneered. Boom! The ground in front of Ling Han immediately arched up, as if it had a life of its own, turning into a wall. This was a dimension, and it was also Hysteria's body. Naturally, it could change its body at will. Boom! Ling Han directly crashed into it, and this wall immediately shattered, but Ling Han's speed was also unavoidably affected. Hysteria's attack had already arrived, and was headed straight for Ling Han. Ling Han turned around to face the attack. Hysteria's attack was too terrifying. Even though his defense was powerful, he still had no choice but to parry it. Even if a single strike could not completely break through his defense, he still had to be on guard. Under the huge impact, Ling Han only felt his arms go numb, and his entire body was sent flying. Boom! 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 The terrain here changed drastically. The ground began to wrinkle, and the path ahead had already disappeared, turning into hard mountain rock. There was no way back now. He would either have to find another path, or he would have to fight his way through. Ling Han decisively chose to advance courageously. Since hysteria could change his path, it could naturally change any other part. In the first place, this was the inside of its body, and it could change it however it wanted. Boom! 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 Ling Han was like a god of destruction, forcefully opening up a path. However, the ground here was incomparably firm and could even withstand a 6th tier attack. Although Ling Han's current strength had far surpassed the 6th tier, the ground here was too thick. Ling Han's punch could blast out a huge hole that was over 50 kilometers deep. But what was the overall thickness? This greatly limited Ling Han's speed, and Hysteria's tentacle naturally caught up to him easily. Ling Han turned to face the attack. Pung! The tentacle whipped over, instantly sending him flying. However, relying on the power of Hysteria's attack, Ling Han forcefully shattered a large area behind him. His face was slightly flushed. This attack had almost shattered his defense. Even so, his internal organs had still suffered some impact, making him feel a little uncomfortable. However, there was no time for him to adjust. He immediately restored his defenses and continued to charge forward. Hysteria chased after Ling Han, while Ling Han ran for his life. He felt like he was walking on the edge of life and death again, which allowed him to gain endless enlightenment, as if there were flowers blooming in the void. After escaping this time, he would definitely be able to improve greatly. It had been a long time since he had experienced such a feeling. As his strength reached the peak of the 7th tier, the only thing in the world that could threaten his life was hysteria. Ling Han continuously endured the bombardment of hysteria, and blood was already seeping out from the corner of his mouth. On the 2nd day, the skin all over his body had cracked open, and blood gushed out, dyeing his entire body red. The speed of his return was too slow. Originally, it had only taken him half a day to charge his way over, but now it had already been a day, and he was only halfway there. One more day. Ling Han gritted his teeth. This escape was abnormally arduous, but if he couldn't endure it, he would die. Under the threat of death, he unearthed his potential further, and boundless power surged out of his body, supporting him to continuously persevere. Hysteria was also shocked. It would have been fine if Ling Han had been in the 7th tier, but he was clearly only in the 6th tier, and did not have an undying and indestructible physique. So how could he persist for such a long time under its frenzied bombardment? Such a person could not be left alive. Its attacks became more and more violent. Previously, it had only lashed out with one tentacle, but now there were 2 of them. After another half a day, the number had increased to 3. An additional tentacle wasn't just a change in quantity. Indeed, its power had also increased greatly. The 3 tentacles lashed out wildly, and their attacks were as violent as a tidal wave. Boom! There were also spiritual attacks that condensed into heavenly spears that stabbed towards Ling Han, intending to destroy his mind. However, there were millions of dimensions in Ling Han's body, and every dimension had developed life. Even if they were just ordinary birds, beasts, or in fact just plants, they still contained a trace of consciousness. When these consciousnesses were combined, how powerful could they be? Hysteria's spiritual assault came crashing over, but it was caught by these consciousnesses and disintegrated bit by bit. By the time it finally reached Ling Han's mind, it was already spent and no longer had any destructive power. Even a being as strong as Hysteria had its limits. Ha ha ha! Hysteria, I'll remember this debt for now. It won't be long before I suppress you, Ling Han said as he sped away. There won't be a next time, Hysteria balefully said as it brandished its 4th tentacle. If it couldn't kill Ling Han this time, then there would really be nothing it could do when Ling Han advanced into the 7th tier and attained an undying and indestructible physique. Of course, if it could devour the entire Genesis world, its power would reach a new height, and killing a seventh tier would become possible. Ling Han roared madly, breaking through the siege all the way, as if he had gone mad. Pung! A passageway appeared diagonally in front of them. Even hysteria couldn't affect the passageway of the two realms. Now that he was here, it was finally a smooth path. Ling Han, on the other hand, sneered coldly. He did not head towards that passageway at all, and instead continued to charge forward. I haven't reached the passageway of the two realms yet, Ling Han thought to himself. How long had his journey been? He knew very well, and a passageway of the two realms had appeared here. It was too early. Therefore, this one had to be fake. If Ling Han really turned into this passage, it would definitely not lead to the profound negative realm, but to the interior of Hysteria's body. Then he might not be able to walk out of it for the rest of his life. This was a trap that Hysteria had set for him. Since this was the interior of Hysteria, creating such an environment was simply too easy. However, after advancing another 9,000 meters, another passageway appeared in front of Ling Han, and there were two of them. Ling Han hesitated slightly. According to his calculations, the passageway of the two realms should be here, but two had actually appeared. One of them was definitely fake, and it was created by Hysteria. If he walked into it, he might unknowingly be led into the interior of Hysteria. Which one was it? He would know after walking for a while. In any case, a spatial passageway was only so long. After walking for a while, it should be the profound, negative realm. If he couldn't reach the other end, he could immediately turn back. He chose the passage on the right side. He leaped into the passageway, and in just 2 or 3 steps, a familiar sky appeared in front of him, and a familiar power assaulted his face. This was the aura that belonged solely to the profound negative realm. Chapter 3053. 3053, who is attacking? Chapter 3053. 3053, who is attacking? 3053, who is attacking? He was out. Ling Han fell out, but his figure did not stop. Even if Hysteria would be suppressed by the heaven and earth of the profound negative realm from here onwards, the battle prowess it could unleash was still terrifying, and he absolutely could not be careless. He sped forward and further ran for tens of thousands of kilometers before stopping. Once he had reached this place, he was no longer within Hysteria's domain. It would become rather difficult for it to track Ling Han's whereabouts. Ling Han lay on the ground, panting heavily. He had already made a very high estimate of Hysteria, but he had still miscalculated, as expected of the number 1 scourge in history. It was truly too powerful. If I want to stand against Hysteria, I must develop the dimensions in my body into high-tier, high-level dimensions. Otherwise, my own defense will still be unable to withstand its attack. Ling Han looked at the gray sky. In the realm battlefield, the sky was dark and extremely oppressive. The gains this time are not small. After destroying many mother trees, I can at least reduce the pressure on the secondary battlefield. In the end, Hysteria must have used a lot of strength to chase after me. This will also have a positive effect on the main battlefield. Although I didn't talk much with Hysteria, it revealed some secrets. What exactly is the world's core? Does it even exist? Chongyan, and his group all know about this thing. It was revealed by the world's will of the Genesis world of the last era. But this guy itself is very suspicious. It kept blabbering, and seemed to have accidentally let this piece of information slip out, which made it seem very genuine, but it has a more confusing effect. If this so-called world's will is lying, there might not be a world's core. If this deduction is true, then what's its purpose in deceiving Chong Yen and me? Also, Hysteria mocked me as a frog at the bottom of a well. What's the truth behind these words? Could it be that the void is so big and there's a second, third, or even more Genesis worlds? Ling Han was shocked. Could it be that Genesis worlds could also be like dimensions, one after another, without an end? Thinking about it, it made sense. Compared to the void, the Genesis world was indeed pitifully small. It wasn't impossible to say that there were a few or even more Genesis worlds in the void. Things are getting more and more confusing. Just what are Hysteria and the worlds while plotting? And what is the role of extermination in this? Ling Han muttered. However, this was clearly not something that he could think of just by clasping his head here. Thus, he quickly got up and decided not to think about these things for the time being. Strength was the most important thing. As long as one had enough strength, one punch would be enough to settle anything well, at most 2 punches. Ling Han returned to the barrier at the secondary battlefield, and upon seeing his bloody appearance, Lin Yulian and the others were all shocked. Hysteria was indeed hysteria. Even someone as powerful as Ling Han was in such a sorry state. As expected of its reputation as the #1 monster in the world who wreaked havoc. Meanwhile, Ling Han was also very impressive and awesome. As a 6th tier, he could actually go to the headquarters of Hysteria, charge right in, and come charging back again. This should be something that even 7th tiers could not do. Ling Han briefly explained the situation, but did not reveal the details of his conversation with Hysteria. He did not want Lin Yulian and the others to be overly suspicious for no reason. Their focus should still be on cultivation. "When can you guys break through to the 7th tier?" he asked. Lin Yulian and the others all shook their heads. Breaking through to the 7th tier was easier said than done. Without the accumulation of a few epochs, it was impossible for them to break through easily. Just take a look. Right until this moment, just how many 7th tiers had been nurtured in this era of the Genesis world. Furthermore, that was still because they had the core of the Flaming Frost realm, which allowed 10,000 shadows and golden silk moth to take that final step. Otherwise, there would only be 7 ultimate elites. For these 4 people to break through to the 7th tier as soon as possible, they would possibly have to place their hopes on the destruction of the profound negative realm so that another dimensional core could be contributed. Ling Han did not ask further. He left the realm battlefield and prepared to make another trip to the various dimensions to see if there were any new gains. Once the dimensions in his body matured, he would truly become qualified to stand against Hysteria. Even if he would still be outmatched, he could at least ensure that he would not be killed or wounded. Ling Han first recuperated from his injuries. Fortunately, they didn't hurt his foundation, and he recovered very quickly. He set off and returned to reunite with everyone. Then he began his interdimensional journey. He passed through one dimension after another, and after arriving at a low-level dimension, Ling Han received a piece of news that made him frown incessantly. A person who met Ling Han's requirements had indeed been discovered here 300,000 years ago, but only 70,000 years had passed, and he had suddenly disappeared. No one knew how he had disappeared, and it was as if he had never existed. Ling Han didn't believe that this was definitely an elite who had interfered and captured him. However, there was a 1st tier heavenly venerate guarding this place. To be able to make him unable to detect anything, the other party's cultivation level had to be at least at the 3rd tier. A 3rd tier ultimate elite had appeared in a low-level dimension. This was impossible unless the other party came from another dimension. That was worth thinking about, then. Did he pass by here coincidentally and discover that the chosen person had outstanding natural talent in cultivation? So he took him in as a disciple and left silently. Or was the other party targeting the light spot in the chosen person's mind? It would be fine if it was the former, but if it was the latter, then it would be a big problem. Ling Han traced back time to 230,000 years ago. He had indeed seen a young man here, but then he suddenly disappeared. Ling Han set the time for the day of the disappearance and slowly examined this one day. The young man had been cultivating when he suddenly revealed a shocked expression and disappeared. Ling Han seemed to have seen a large hand grab out, but it was too blurry. He wanted to see clearly, but there was nothing he could do. Too much time had passed, and the person who had attacked had been too powerful. He had blinded the heavens, preventing time from leaving a shadow of him. However, even if he only saw a hand, Ling Han was sure that this person's strength was incomparable, and he was at least a 5th-tier heavenly venerate. Ling Han did make a big fuss, and arrived at the next dimension. However, the type of person he was looking for wasn't here. After traveling through 937 dimensions, he finally found someone who met the requirements. After Ling Han obtained the information regarding the light spot in that person's mind, a thought occurred to him. He decided not to send this person to the profound negative realm first, but to stay behind and pretend that nothing had happened. Traveling through dimensions was extremely time-consuming, apart from special people like Ling Han, who would need hundreds or thousands of years, or in fact even longer. Therefore, if someone was also searching for someone with a speck of light in his mind, that person should be slower than Ling Han and would come looking. He would wait for him, then. He wanted to snatch that young man back from him. Ling Han sat quietly at the side. He restrained all of his aura. With the height he was currently standing at, no one would be able to discover his existence at all unless Hysteria personally arrived. Another 90,000 years passed, and Ling Han suddenly sensed a powerful aura surging over. Chapter 3054, 3054, so it's you. Chapter 3054, 3054, so it's you. 3054, so it's you. Here he comes. Ling Han's eyes suddenly lit up. He still didn't reveal a trace of his aura and only sat quietly. A figure quietly appeared. He did not alert anyone, and only a powerful existence like Ling Han could sense his aura. When Ling Han saw this person's appearance, he couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. In fact, he even had a feeling of disbelief. It wasn't him, but her. Extermination. It was actually Extermination, the destroyer of the previous era, who was snatching people from him. What was the purpose? Ling Han didn't beat around the bush. By now, there was no longer any need for him to do this anymore. He stepped out. Boom! Power that surpassed the peak of 7th tier surged, incomparably terrifying. Extermination was instantly alerted and looked towards him. A trace of shock flashed across her beautiful face, as if she was also very surprised to see Ling Han here. Don't you think it's too much to take away my people without my permission? Ling Han said calmly. Extermination stood with her hands crossed behind her back, looking coldly at Ling Han, a hint of disdain at the corners of her mouth. This was completely different from the Juhua, who had called himself Niu in the past. Ling Han sighed. He still wanted to see the Juhua of the past, but now this might no longer be possible. Don't go against me. Extermination said with baleful killing intent. Huh. Ling Han laughed loudly. You're clearly the one who's snatching my people. So how did it become me going against you? Who are you now? Juhua, Extermination, or who? You don't need to know this. Extermination said. Now retreat immediately or don't blame me for being heartless. Ling Han shook his head and said, You are also the abductor in the Thousand Leaves realm, right? If you hand the young man over, I'll only beat you up. In your dreams, Extermination said coldly, not taking Ling Han's words to heart at all. Then you're the one who's asking for a beating. Ling Han charged out. Pum! A heavy punch sent Extermination flying, and behind the void split open behind her, and Extermination directly disappeared inside. The destructive power of a 7th tier battle was too great, much too great. This was only a low-level dimension. So how could it possibly withstand such torment? It would definitely be blasted apart. Extermination looked surprised. Your strength actually increased so quickly. Thus, obediently hand him over. Ling Han rushed over, his fists pounding furiously. No matter how strong you are only in the 6th tier, Extermination said disdainfully. With a wave of her hand, She brought with her an unparalleled power that pressed down on Ling Han. Pung! 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 The two of them fought fiercely, turning the void into a mess. Extermination was the peerless fiend of the previous generation. Back then, she was someone that even 7th-tier ultimate elites had to risk destroying the Genesis world to kill. This proved how terrifying she was. However, extermination was no longer the same as before. Her physical body had been blasted apart, and her divine sense had also left her body. Now, a new consciousness had been born, causing her battle prowess to plummet, and she no longer possessed the terrifying abilities to crush all 7th tiers. She was still very strong. After all, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse, so she was only slightly at a disadvantage when she clashed with Ling Han. However, it was precisely because she was at a disadvantage that extermination could not accept it. How could a 6th tier be so strong? However, extermination still had her advantages. Her physique was not bad, and she was completely capable of fighting a battle of attrition with Ling Han. However, this was something that extermination could not tolerate. Just how powerful had she been in the past? If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have let you live until today, she said hatefully. Back then, she had had the chance to make a move on Ling Han. After all, when she had still been Juhua, Ling Han had almost never been on guard against her. So much nonsense. Ling Han continued to attack, since Juhua was unwilling to hand over the person he wanted. He could only beat her until she submitted. Also, why was extermination looking for the same target as him? Could she also resonate with the light spots? Wait, didn't the worlds will say that it had repaired extermination's body and given her another soul, allowing extermination to stand against hysteria now? In the future, she would have to join forces with Ling Han and combine the power of yin and yang into the 8th fundamental power to kill hysteria. What was the meaning of this, now, then? Was it the world's will? Correct. Since this extermination was resurrected by the world's will and given a new spirit, the question was, how did the world's will give a new spirit? What was the essence of this spirit? Also, the world's will said that it was about to dissipate and die, but there was a powerful body in front of it. Why didn't it enter it and use it for itself? Generally speaking, weak souls could not enter the bodies of elites, because the bodies of elites had a powerful repulsive force. In that case, it was impossible to even enter, so how could it occupy her mind and take over her body? However, if the world's will was really the world's will, then possessing the body of a 7th-tier elite was not impossible. Why would the world's will of the last era rather dissipate than possess this body? Unless it had already done so. Ling Han's eyes lit up and he suddenly shouted, "So it's you! What do you mean by it's you?" Extermination continued to bombard Ling Han with attacks, each and every one of them swift and fierce. She wanted to send Ling Han flying and then leave the void to seize her target. At the core of the Genesis world of the last era, we've even met before. How could you forget about it, just like that? Ling Han said calmly. Extermination's eyes suddenly lit up, and an astonishing cold light shot out. Even her attack had lost its accuracy. It really is you, Ling Han said with absolute certainty. In fact, he wasn't certain at all before. He was completely in a daze. Extermination probably didn't expect his thoughts to jump from one aspect to another so quickly like this. In the end, it caused her to have an obvious reaction. "I don't know what you're talking about," Extermination said coldly. Ling Han shook his head and said, "That's meaningless. Now that we've spoken so much, do you think you can still fool me?" All of a sudden, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. The world's will had directed its own death. This way, no matter what it had said before, Ling Han would not doubt Itwo would doubt a person who was about to die. For example, it wanted Ling Han to cooperate with extermination and convince Ling Han that only by joining forces with extermination could they eliminate hysteria. In this way, Ling Han would think of ways to gain Extermination's trust, and even in fact sacrifice some of his own benefits. However, what the Worlds did not expect was that Ling Han would actually discover a speck of light in his body, which was actually very coincidental. If Ling Han had not met Ning Haixin and become curious about her, how could he have drawn out his own secret? Moreover, while he was also involved, it could be said that the entire incident was a series of coincidences. No matter how good the World's will was at scheming, it couldn't have predicted such a thing, right? From the looks of it, the World's core was probably fake as well. Otherwise, Hysteria wouldn't be completely clueless about it. In that case, Chong Yen and the others were also fooled. Strange, this World's will had gone through so much trouble to deceive people, so what was it after? Chapter 3055 3055 The Mystery Within the Mystery. Chapter 3055 3055 The Mystery Within the Mystery. 3055 The Mystery Within the Mystery. Extermination didn't reply, and only increased the intensity of her attacks. At this time, it didn't matter what she said. The more she said, the more mistakes she would make. It was better not to say anything. Then let me analyze it, Ling Han said as they exchanged blows. Right now, the only thing in the world that could threaten him was still Hysteria. Even the true body of Extermination from the last era would not be able to suppress him. According to the timeline, you first sent the seeds of life to Chong Yen and the others, and also disclosed some secrets to them, letting them know of the existence of the World's core. According to the information you revealed, this should allow them to advance to the 8th tier, right? Otherwise, Chong Yen and the others wouldn't be so crazy. But from what I found out from Hysteria, it doesn't know about the existence of the World's core. Although we're enemies, I'm more willing to believe Hysteria's words now. So you must be lying. The question is, why did you lie to Chong Yen and the others? What benefits do you gain from it? Ling Han stopped, looked at Extermination with a smile, and said, "Are you willing to answer my questions? You're very smart and even bolder." Extermination said, "I originally thought that this secret wouldn't be revealed until Chong Yen and the others died, but I didn't expect you to be so bold as to verify it with Hysteria. If I had known, I wouldn't have revealed it to you on purpose." Although she had the appearance of a peerless beauty, right now her black hair was dancing wildly, and even her hair was entwined with terrifying power. There was an energy storm forming, and a single strand of hair could really kill a 6th tier. She was incomparably powerful. "Destroy!" she cried out softly, and pushed out with her jade-like hands, launching a burst of force that transformed into a mountain pressing down on Ling Han. Ling Han threw a punch. Pum! The mountain immediately crumbled, but he also slid backward, a slight look of surprise on his face. Extermination had channeled some kind of secret technique into this attack, allowing the scattered forces to condense together. As a result, the power of this attack had increased by many times. Fortunately, Ling Han was surrounded by layers of defensive energy. This had only reduced his defenses by 14 layers. Compared to Hysteria, the difference was incomparably obvious. Ling Han continued, "Since you had possessed this body a long time ago, yet intentionally left a portion of your consciousness at the core of the Genesis world of the last era, what is your purpose? Just to say those words to me on purpose? Or do you want to use the power there to do something to me?" Back then, the power there was extremely strange. It could ignore his defense. Perhaps only the Genesis world could do this. It was also the reason why Extermination had to split away a portion of its consciousness there. Now that I think about it, you probably want to do something to me, and the target should be the light spot in my mind. Is that right? Ling Han looked at Extermination. Extermination attacked a few times before saying coldly, "Not bad. You're very good at guessing." Ling Han shook his head and said, "It's not that I am good at guessing, but that you exposed yourself. If Extermination hadn't kidnapped the person he had been looking for, then Ling Han definitely wouldn't have thought of this. This was truly a completely unrelated matter. So how could he possibly make the connection? Of course, on the other hand, it was also because Ling Han had unlocked the secret of his body possessing the mark of life. You've done so much for the sake of advancing to the 8th tier, right? Ling Han asked again. Extermination didn't say anything. She just sneered and attacked continuously. You even wanted to trick me into joining forces with you. Do you take me for a sucker as well? Ling Han asked again. He frowned slightly. At that time, apart from spying on the secret of the light spot in his mind, did extermination have any other trump cards? Could this kind of backup plan suddenly cause him to lose his battle prowess, or could it be to control him? However, Ling Han immediately shook his head. The power of dimension in his body surged. It surpassed any kind of fundamental power, and he didn't discover anything unusual at all. Extermination's current strength was about the same as his, but it was impossible for him to be unaware of any tricks that extermination had set up in his body. Humph, since you've guessed my identity, I can't let you live. Extermination roared, and her black hair danced wildly, transforming into numerous arrows that shot towards Ling Han. Pung, pung, pung. These strands of hair struck Ling Han's body, triggering the explosion of his defenses. Light flashed wildly, and his defenses were quickly destroyed layer by layer. However, with just a thought from Ling Han, new defenses immediately formed. As long as the power directed at him did not reach the level of crushing Ling Han, it would definitely not be able to break through Ling Han's defenses. Ling Han shook his head and said, I didn't guess your identity. I merely uncovered your first layer of disguise. He stared at extermination with a burning gaze. Who are you? Don't tell me it's some world's will. Whom are you trying to fool? The other party had intentionally pretended to be angry out of embarrassment in order to cover it up and prevent Ling Han from thinking any further. Extermination sneered. Despite the fierce battle, she was still indescribably beautiful and pleasing to the eye. She didn't reply and continued to attack. Although she believed that Ling Han would never be able to guess her identity, talking to Ling Han did not benefit her in the slightest, so there was naturally no need for her to reply. If you don't tell me, then I'll beat you up and make you spill all your secrets. Ling Han let out a long cry and brandished his fists of fury. All the 5th grade seals were channeled, and his power surged by 4,000 times. This was truly too terrifying. Even someone as powerful as extermination could only parry. If she received another punch, she would be sent flying. She was completely outmatched. In this world, only hysteria could compete with Ling Han. Ling Han chased after her, and a fist smashed into extermination's face. No matter what kind of peerless beauty you were, as long as you were an enemy, gender didn't matter. Pung, pung, pung. Ling Han repeatedly brandished his fists. He wanted to suppress the other party and force her to reveal her secrets. Dream on. Extermination said coldly. Her body moved, and her black dress fluttered as she began to break away from the clash. Ling Han naturally wouldn't let her leave easily, and his attacks became even more violent. He was going all out, and his current power could be said to be incomparably violent. With a single strike, a few scraps of clothing flew into the air. Extermination looked at her arm. There was a rip here, revealing her snow-white arm. A hint of embarrassment and anger appeared on her pretty face. Previously, she was still at ease and could protect the clothes on her body, but now Ling Han's explosive power was too terrifying, and she was unable to protect her clothes. Ling Han was also slightly taken aback, but he immediately regained his fighting spirit. He did not differentiate between men and women as long as they were his enemy. He did not have any evil thoughts in his heart, so what did he have to worry about? Die. He attacked again. Pung, pung, pung. Under his frenzied attacks, extermination looked even more miserable. However, a 7th tier was a 7th tier after all, so how could she not have some tricks up her sleeve? When the black dress was close to exposing her body, layers of black mist surged out from her body and enveloped her. It seemed to have turned into clothes or a shield. Ling Han was astounded because he immediately discovered that this black mist was not as simple as it seemed. Instead, it had a powerful deflective effect. When his attacks struck, they would all be deflected to either side of her, making it very difficult for impact to touch her. Chapter 3056. 3056, Another Discovery. Chapter 3056. 3056, Another Discovery. 3056, Another Discovery. For seventh tiers, there was no difference whether the attack they received was strong or weak. In any case, their physiques were indestructible, so who cared? But what extermination was doing now was breaking away from a fight, so the situation was different. Originally, Ling Han could suppress her with a single strike, but the power was scattered now when he attacked her, and the impact she took was pitifully small. Naturally, it could no longer stop her, and she forcefully charged her way out. Interesting, Ling Han thought to himself. He had set up 100 layers of energy shields on his body, layer by layer, to nullify the attacks he received. Even someone as powerful as Hysteria would not be able to injure him with a single strike. Extermination now used another method to weaken the attack power she would sustain. This was also an excellent defensive method. It can be used as a reference, Ling Han thought to himself. He had never been arrogant and conceited such that he would consider his methods the best. When this battle was over, he would definitely ponder over extermination's defensive method. It was truly worth learning. However, practically no damage would be inflicted on extermination now, so there was naturally no way to stop her. She repeatedly managed to break away from the fight. Ling Han could only leave the void first and send away the person with the ball of light in his mind. This was the target of extermination. If he sent him away, this trip would be considered a complete failure for extermination. She had even been tricked into revealing some information by Ling Han. Although she had not revealed her true identity, she had still exposed the first layer of her disguise. Ling Han! Extermination shouted harshly. She did not have Ling Han's ability to travel through dimensions. Once this person left the dimension, she could no longer track him, and he would completely vanish from her radar. Ling Han dug his ears and said nonchalantly, "There's no need to be so loud. I'm not deaf." Extermination looked at him balefully and shouted, "Hand him over!" "Ha! Don't forget, you were the one who snatched my people first, and now you want me to hand over my own people to you. Who do you think you are?" Ling Han sneered. "Could it be that you think you could make demands just because you were beautiful?" The Empress and Hunyo were not inferior to her at all, so how could Ling Han be affected by her? "Have you ever thought of the consequences of going against me?" Extermination said, "You can match me, but what about your family? I remember that you have several wives and children." Humph. She was all alone and could do whatever she wanted without any scruples. Ling Han frowned, and killing intent instantly erupted from his eyes. Originally, he only wanted to suppress extermination. After all, she was no longer the great demon from back then, and he didn't know who had possessed her. But now the other party was actually using his own family to threaten him, and this caused Ling Han's killing intent to rise. "When I advance to the 7th tier, you will be the first I kill," he said word by word. Extermination could not help but be taken over by his aura. After being stunned for a moment, she laughed out loud. "I'm indestructible for eternity. Even the impact of the destruction of the Genesis world can't kill me. What makes you think you can?" "I'll give you 3 days to consider. 3 days later, if the person I want appears here, I'll pretend that nothing happened. Otherwise, don't blame me for starting a massacre." She turned around and tore open a rip in space to leave. Ling Han didn't give chase. Even Hysteria couldn't kill a 7th tier, so it was naturally even more impossible for him to do so. Furthermore, extermination was far more powerful than Chong Yen and the others, and he couldn't even suppress her. This time, both sides suffered a little. Ling Han hadn't been able to get the target back, and extermination hadn't been able to take her target away, either. I have to hurry. Ling Han continued to head to the next dimension, and then continuously shuttled back and forth. He wanted to find more people with balls of light in their minds, and completely analyze the secret code of life. However, such people were truly too few and far between. After one round, Ling Han had gained nothing. After returning to the profound negative realm, Ling Han temporarily took a break and spent some time with his family. The threat of extermination was very real. She was alone and she was immortal. She could do whatever she wanted without any scruples. Thus, Ling Han began to move and sent his entire family to a low-level dimension to temporarily settle down. Unfortunately, the clan could not produce a second person with 7th-tier battle prowess, or else they would be able to share Ling Han's burden. Ling Shi and Fu Tianqing were still stuck at the 4th tier. This leap from the 4th tier to the 5th tier was too difficult. Even Ling Han had relied on a fragment of the dimensional core to breach the gap back then. Now, the only transcendent dimension in the world was the profound, negative realm. So how could it be shattered for them? Ning Hai's explosive burst could not be replicated. She was now in the 2nd tier, and it could be said that she was far from the 7th tier. Ling Han did not stop his research on the ball of light in his mind. He only analyzed the life code within it. But there was actually still more information, and there should be more secrets hidden within. Perhaps this was also the reason why he was so impressive and awesome in alchemy. Ning Haixin, on the other hand, had a strong affinity because of this. Since he couldn't find a new secret code of life, he naturally couldn't waste time. After all, there might be a huge treasure hidden there. Ling Han immersed himself in such research day and night. Of course, he did not neglect to cultivate, but once he reached the heavenly venerable tier, it was almost impossible for his cultivation level to advance rapidly. Were there any more items like great herbs or dimensional cores? No, he could only do it step by step. Ling Han had already reached the final step. Thus, wanting to reach the peak stage of the 6th tier was an extremely difficult task. And to get from the peak stage of the 6th tier to the 7th tier was even more difficult. After tens of thousands of years, Ling Han had gained nothing. He thought for a moment and gathered Ning Haixin, Batai, Ma Chengao and company together, since the resonance between the two of them could unravel the secret of the ball of light. What miracle would happen if more people resonated? There were a total of 8 people. They intertwined their divine senses and lit up the ball of light in their minds. Ling Han only felt his body tremble, and an intense pain instantly assaulted him. Ning Haixin and the others covered their heads with their hands and revealed pained expressions. Ning Haixin was still fine, but Batai, Ma Chengao, and the others were all bleeding from all 7 orifices. They had almost died. This impact was too violent, and it directly assaulted the mind, as if it wanted to shatter it. Ling Han was also shocked. Then he thought back, and couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. When the 8 lights resonated, he seemed to see a miniature version of the Genesis world. Within one of the dimensions, there were 8 spots of light shining, and in the dimension 17 levels away, there was a weak spot of light flashing. Was this the 9th person who had a ball of light in his mind? Ling Han immediately moved out and arrived at this medium-level dimension. According to his memories, he narrowed down the scope and then conscripted many celestial king-tier forces to search for the person. Of course, they were using the testing device that he and Wally had created together to conduct their search. However, even if the range was reduced, this was still a very, very large area. The number of living beings they had to search was in the hundreds of billions. How small was the probability of finding a specific person, fearsome being, who was perhaps not even a human? Ling Han didn't lack patience. He waited and cultivated at the same time. In any case, he wasn't wasting his time. Chapter 3057, 3057 Bounty. Chapter 3057, 3057 Bounty. 3057 Bounty. The Wong clan of Qianshui Town was a very powerful clan in the local area, with a severing mundane ancestor in charge. The only clan that could rival the Wong clan was the Li clan. The two clans competed with each other, but they would also work together to eliminate the forces that might threaten them. For hundreds of millions of years, although the two clans had some conflicts, they were also living in relative harmony. However, on this night, blood flowed like a river in the Wong clan. An old servant knelt down in front of a youth with tears streaming down his face and said, "Young master, the ancestor, clan leader, and the others have all died in battle. You are the clan's only hope. Please leave quickly." That young man looked to be only 15 or 16 years old. He was very stubborn, and his eyes flashed with light as he said, "There are no cowards in the Wong clan who run away without fighting. I would rather die and be buried together with my great-grandfather and father." "Young master, you can't. You can't," the old servant advised, but the youth was determined and was not moved at all. "Young master, I'm sorry for offending you." The old servant made a move. "Pa!" He delivered a chop with his hand at the young man's neck, causing him to faint. The old servant dug a hole and buried the youth in it. He had just sprinkled leaves on it when his expression changed drastically. "Young master, you are the last seedling of the Wong clan. Please live on." The old servant knelt down and kowtowed a few times. Suddenly he let out a long howl and used a motion technique, leaving quickly. "Xiao, xiao, xiao!" Immediately, 5 figures pounced over, close at the heels of the old servant's figure as they chased after him. "Old man, you can't escape. Hand over the remaining members of the Wong clan, and we might spare your life." One fled, while the other 5 pursued, and soon all 6 disappeared without a trace. 3 days later, the ground cracked open, and the young man rushed out. His name was Wang Chuanha, and he was the only son of the clan leader of the Wong clan in Qianshui Town. His eyes were red, as if they could spew fire. "Uncle Chi must have lured away the pursuers for my safety," Wang Chuanha muttered to himself. "The pursuers are so powerful. The odds would definitely have been against Uncle Chi. I can't get myself killed as well." The young man calmed down. "I am the only one left in the Wong clan. If I die as well, there will never be anyone to avenge the Wong clan. Li Jingchu, you're so cruel. So cruel." Wang Chuanha gritted his teeth. The destruction of the Wong clan was all because of the Li clan. However, hadn't the Wong and Li clans always been evenly matched, with neither able to do anything to the other? The story started 3 years ago when Wang Chuanha met Li Jingchu, the granddaughter of the second elder of the Li clan. The young man had his first realization of love and fell in love with her at first sight. Unexpectedly, the other party also had a favorable impression of him. The two of them kept interacting with each other, and they quietly got together. In the end, the young man mustered up the courage to confess to his family, only to be reprimanded. Although the Wang and Li clans could not be considered as feuding clans, they had always competed with each other, and there had been many nasty incidents. How could there be a marriage alliance? Moreover, it would involve an important figure like the future clan leader. However, Wang Chuanha had made up his mind. Coincidentally, the Li clan had also sent someone over and said that they might as well allow this marriage. From then on, the Wang and Li clans would become a family and help each other. In the end, the Wang clan had no choice but to compromise and agree to this marriage. However, on the day of the wedding, all the important figures of the Wang clan were poisoned. The Li clan members who came to the banquet also bared their fangs and started a massacre. In one night, they killed all the important figures of the Wang clan. Wang Chuanha was rescued by the clan's loyal servants, but after being hunted down the whole way, he was only left with one old servant, who had probably met with misfortune as well. What Wang Chuanha found most unacceptable and heartbreaking was that it was Li Jingchu who had poisoned the important figures of the clan. When she was paying her respects to the Wang clan, she served tea to them one by one. The poison was contained in the tea. Who would have thought that the new bride would be so ruthless? Such a betrayal naturally made Wang Chuanha's heart ache. He blamed himself. He felt that it was his fault that the Wang clan was destroyed. That was why he wanted to fight the Li clan to the death in a moment of impulse. However, after calming down, he knew that this was just sending himself to his death. It would only cause the deaths of his parents and family to be even more unjust. I want revenge. But first, I have to get out of here. There's only hope if you're alive. He left Qianshui town and walked forward without any destination in mind. 3 years later, he arrived in a large city. Along the way, he encountered countless dangers. There were ferocious beasts and mountain bandits who had killed countless people. But his luck was incomparably good. He could always find a chance to survive when he was at the end of his rope. His clothes were ragged, and he no longer looked like the young master of the Wang clan. He looked like a beggar. After entering the city, Wang Chuanha walked in a daze. He longed for revenge, but how could it be easy for him to take revenge? Without the support of the Wang clan, he was only a mere heavenly body tier. How could he advance into the severing mundane tier? It was a long way off. As he walked, he stopped. His heart was filled with dejection. He sat down in a daze. A great elite in this city had created a sun and moon. Soon, the sun set and the moon rose, scattering gentle moonlight. No, I can't continue to be like this. If I lose my will to fight, who can avenge the Wang clan? Wang Chuanha regained a trace of fighting spirit. He got up and was about to find a place to rest when he suddenly saw a notice on the opposite wall. It said that as long as they went to Prince Xian's mansion in the city for some kind of test, if they passed, they would be able to obtain a promise from Prince Ma Xian. They could make any request, even if it was to marry Prince Ma Xian's daughter. Who was Prince Ma Xian? He was a celestial king. Wang Chuanha was stunned, and he couldn't help but have a glimmer of hope. If he could pass this test, then could he ask Prince Ma Xian to exterminate the Li clan? He naturally knew that to be able to make a celestial king offer such conditions, there were probably only a handful of people in the world who could pass this test, and his hope was infinitely close to zero. However, he still had to give it a try. What if? What if? He headed toward Prince Xian's manor in the city and saw that there was a line at the entrance. More and more people were coming out, shaking their heads and sighing. Sigh, can anyone really pass that test? It is not a test of natural talent in cultivation, and it is not a test on abilities in cultivation, either. How exactly can one pass? It's weird. The people who came out were still complaining, but it didn't affect the enthusiasm of the people lining up outside. If they passed, the rewards would be too great. What kind of test is it? Someone in the line asked. You have to put something on your head. You don't have to do anything. In about 10 breaths, they'll tell you that you haven't passed the test and that you can leave now, the person who came out said. Upon hearing this, Wang Chuanha felt a surge of hope, but he also felt that his hopes were extremely faint. His natural talent in cultivation wasn't bad, but it couldn't be considered top-notch either. At the very least, there were many people superior to him. Therefore, in terms of natural talent in cultivation, it was absolutely impossible for him to pass. Thus, he was a little more confident in himself. However, with so many people unable to pass, he was naturally not confident at all. TSK, what a joke. Even a beggar came to try his luck? Chapter 3058, 3058 Disdain. Chapter 3058, 3058 Disdain. 3058 Disdain. Someone in front of Wang Chuanha turned around and sneered. It was a young man in embroidered clothes. He had just noticed that a little beggar of heavenly body tier had suddenly appeared behind him, and a look of disgust instantly appeared on his face. The test didn't take long, only 10 breaths, but there were so many people lining up. How long would it take until it was his turn? Was he going to endure this little beggar's stench forever? It was disgusting just thinking about it. "Little beggar, get lost," the young man in embroidered clothes said disdainfully. He was a severing, mundane tear, and he could kill Wang Chuanha a few hundred times with a single glance. Wang Chuanha gritted his teeth. If he were still the young master of the Wang clan, he would have immediately slammed the table and stood up when he heard this. But now he knew what kind of situation he was in. So what if he was still the young master of the Wang clan? His opponent was a severing, mundane tear, and the latter could kill him countless times with a single hand. This was the manner of a celestial king, so no matter how arrogant the other party was, he wouldn't dare to make a move. He would endure this. The young man in embroidered clothes pinched his nose with a look of disdain, as if he felt that Wang Chuanha was still emitting a stench. His eyes were filled with contempt. "Little beggar, are you going to scram or not?" he said balefully. "Even if I don't make a move here, do you think you can pass the test?" "That's impossible." "Then as soon as you step out of this door, I'll let you no regret." Wang Chuanha's body trembled. He hadn't expected the other party to be so unreasonable. Just because he was lining up behind the other party and his clothes were a little tattered, he was despised to the point that the latter wanted to kill him. His clothes were a little tattered, but there was definitely no stench. He had already cleaned them before coming here. Should he persist? He couldn't die. If he died, the Wang clan would really have no hope at all. However, this might be another opportunity to take revenge on the clan. No, he couldn't retreat. If he retreated, he might also retreat step by step when he encountered all kinds of opportunities in the future. He would never have the chance to take his revenge. If he did not fight, how could he surpass the Li clan and take revenge for the extermination of his family? Ha ha ha. Many people in front laughed. This was naturally to mock the young man in embroidered clothes. He had already said such harsh words, but he still couldn't scare away a little beggar who was only a heavenly body tear. How embarrassing. The young man in embroidered clothes couldn't help but flush. He was truly furious. Good, 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 he balefully said. You actually dare to disobey me, Lei Dong. You're really audacious, since you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. This young master will teach you how to behave. Wang Chuanha gritted his teeth and didn't reply. Lei Dong, you're really getting worse as you live. You can't even handle a little beggar? Someone mocked. Lei Dong humphed and said to that person, Xiao Li, do you want to spar with me? You can't even handle a little beggar. Isn't sparring with you just lowering my status? That person laughed and continued to mock Lei Dong. Lei Dong's face alternated between red and green. He wished he could kill someone. However, that person was not weaker than him, and the Lei clan was not stronger than the other clan, either. In the face of the other party's ridicule, he would at most retort. Now he was indeed the one whose weakness had been grasped and being stepped on. This despicable little beggar. He blamed this on Wang Chuanha. If it weren't for the fact that this guy didn't know what was good for him, how could Lei Dong have become a laughing stock? Just you wait. I'll definitely let this little beggar know what regret means. His face was dark, and his entire body was emitting a cold aura. Time passed slowly. People left in disappointment, but the length of the line did not decrease. This was because new people kept joining. If they lined up, there was a chance that they could obtain a huge opportunity. Who would not have this bit of patience? Finally, it was Lei Dong's turn. He entered confidently, but after a long time, he came out dejectedly. When he saw Wang Chuanha, his eyes were filled with killing intent. Of course, he didn't pass the test, and blamed this disappointment on Wang Chuanha. He felt that it was because of Wang Chuanha that he didn't succeed. I'll wait for you outside, little beggar, he said balefully. Before Wang Chuanha could say anything, he had already strode away. This was the manner of a celestial king, so he didn't dare to be too impudent. He could only shoot his mouth off. Wang Chuanha watched as the other party left. He gritted his teeth and strode into the hall. "Sit down." There were two people inside, both expressionless. Wang Chuanha sat down as instructed. Each of them quickly took out something that looked like a headband and put it on his head. He didn't know what this was, but he understood that this was the so-called test. THTH this. A moment later, he heard an incomparably shocked cry behind him. "Finally found him." The two expressionless people's expressions actually changed, and they both cried out in surprise. Wang Chuanha was also stunned. Only then did he realize that he had actually passed the test. Hiss! Didn't this mean that he could make any request to a celestial king? He couldn't help but feel his blood rush to his head. He was so excited that his mind went blank. Li Clan. Oh, Li Clan, you guys never imagined that he would return so quickly to take revenge, right? Li Jingchu. Oh, Li Jingchu, I want to see what your heart is made of. Wang Chuanha's mind was in a daze. He had no idea how he was invited into the inner courtyard. Along the way, many people seemed to be looking at him with reverence and envy. However, Prince Ma Xian didn't appear immediately. Instead, he only appeared in the courtyard where Wang Chuanha was staying 3 days later. "Greetings, my lord." Wang Chuanha knelt down and bowed. Celestial kings were the greatest in the world. Prince Ma Xian, on the other hand, was incomparably polite. He personally stepped forward and raised his hands, preventing Wang Chuanha from bowing down. What a joke! This was the person Ling Han was looking for, so how could he dare to put on airs? "Young friend, how have you been these past few days?" he asked with a smile. "Thank you for your concern, Lord Celestial King. I'm living very well." Wang Chuanha was a little terrified. He was facing a celestial king, yet the latter was still concerned about his daily life. This made him feel touched, terrified, and filled with confidence. Now, there was really hope for revenge for his clan. Prince Ma Xian kept talking, but he was only talking about some unimportant topics. This was because he didn't know why Ling Han was looking for Wang Chuanha. He only knew that this was very important to Ling Han. That was a heavenly venerate. Wang Chuanha couldn't help but feel a little anxious when he saw that the other party was only talking about trifling topics. "Didn't you say that as long as the person met the criteria, you would agree to a request? Why didn't you mention that?" However, if the other party did not say anything, he did not dare to take the initiative to mention it. What if he made the other party unhappy? However, his family feud was like a needle that stabbed into his heart, constantly reminding him. Therefore, after enduring for a long time, he finally mentioned this matter. Prince Ma Xian laughed heartily. "Young man, don't be anxious. A mighty figure is about to arrive. You may make your request to him." Chapter 3059. 3059 Incomparably Coincidental. Chapter 3059. 3059 Incomparably Coincidental. 3059 Incomparably Coincidental. Are you trying to go back on your word? Wang Chuanha thought to himself, "You're already a celestial king. Who else can be called a mighty figure?" He was clearly going back on his word. However, how could he dare to vent his anger on a celestial king? He didn't even need his opponent to make a move. Any random person from this manor could easily kill him. He had been too young and naive after all. With this thought in mind, his face naturally revealed it. Prince Ma Xian smiled faintly. He naturally knew what Wang Chuanha was thinking. In fact, he was also very surprised. A powerful heavenly venerate had gone through so much trouble just to find such an extremely ordinary person. He couldn't see what was so outstanding about Wang Chuanha that he was actually so important to a heavenly venerate. If it weren't for Ling Han, he would have slapped Wang Chuanha to death long ago if he dared to show such emotions. However, he could only entertain the thought now. He knew how important this matter was to Ling Han. "You," he was just about to speak when he was startled because he suddenly received Ling Han's voice transmission. He hurriedly stood up and said respectfully, "Greetings, my lord." Wang Chuanha was shocked. There really was someone more impressive and awesome than Prince Ma Xian. He only saw a blur before his eyes, and there was already another person in the courtyard. He was very young. His face was like jade, and his hair was jet black. It wasn't tied up with a crown, and it fluttered slightly, giving him an indescribable elegance. "Greetings, my lord." His mind being alert at the arrival of a surge of good fortune, he knelt down in front of Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out a finger and lightly pressed it on Wang Chuanha's forehead. He immediately discovered the existence of a speck of light in Wang Chuanha's mind. This was a person he was looking for. "Hang on." Ling Han was suddenly startled. He had discovered even more things. Their bloodlines resonated. This was actually his descendant. How was that possible? This was only a medium-level dimension. Why would his descendants appear here? No, it was indeed possible. Back then, when the 5 ultimate elites attacked, Ling Shi, Ling Jianxue, and the others were all captured, and the descendants of the Ling clan scattered in all directions. Although most of them had fled to various corners of the profound negative realm, there was still a possibility that one of them had escaped here. Crossing 17 dimensions was extremely difficult, but it wasn't impossible after so much time had passed. The Ling clan had once been at its peak, and there would always be some precious treasures that could be passed down to allow travel through dimensions. After arriving here, the descendants of the Ling clan had settled down. However, perhaps when they had been traveling through the dimensions, this bloodline of the Ling clan had also suffered heavy injuries, resulting in the death of all the elites, and only severing mundane tears could emerge from this line of his descendants. In fact, not long ago, their entire clan had been annihilated. Intense anger instantly rose in Ling Han's heart, but after thinking about it, he still decided to let Wang Chuanha deal with it himself. "Thank you for your hard work," he said to Prince Ma Xian. Prince Ma Xian didn't dare to accept the credit at all, and hurriedly said humbly, "It's my duty to do things for you, my lord. It's my duty." In reality, as long as he had a relationship with Ling Han, it would be equivalent to obtaining a talisman that exempted him from death, which celestial king or even heavenly venerate would dare to attack him. This favor was bigger than the sky. Ling Han nodded and said, "You go ahead with your business." "Yes, my lord." Prince Ma Xian quickly left obediently. Although he was very curious about why Ling Han wanted to find such an ordinary person, and what secrets he was hiding. However, curiosity killed the cat. He was just a nobody, so how could he dare to interfere with the matters of a heavenly venerate? After Prince Ma Xian left, Ling Han looked at Wang Chuanha and asked, "What wish do you have?" "Here it is." Wang Chuanha immediately became excited and said, "My lord, I have a deep feud. I would like to ask you to help me eliminate my enemies." "There's no need to call me lord. My name is Ling Han, and you can just call me senior." Ling Han thought for a moment and decided not to reveal the relationship between the two of them for the time being. "Yes, senior," Wang Chuanha hurriedly replied. Ling glanced at him and said, "I won't make a move." Wang Chuanha instantly felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and his excited expression instantly froze. His face was filled with disappointment as he looked towards Ling Han, his lips trembling slightly. "Why?" He wanted to ask, but he couldn't make a sound. "Don't you want to personally ask that woman why she betrayed you?" Ling Han said with a smile. Wang Chuanha was shocked. "My lord, how did you know?" Ling Han had just tapped a finger on his forehead just now, and he had already flipped through all of Wang Chuanha's memories, so he naturally knew what Wang Chuanha had encountered. "I won't make a move, but I can teach you so you can personally take revenge," Ling Han said. After being stunned for a moment, Wang Chuanha hurriedly knelt down. Disciple Wang Chuanha pays his respects to master. Before he could finish his words, he was already lifted up by Ling Han. I won't take in any more disciples. Ling Han shook his head. What a joke. This was his descendant. If he were to take him in as a disciple, wouldn't the hierarchy become a mess? I need something from you, and in return, I'll let you obtain enough strength to take revenge. How about that? Disappointment appeared on Wang Chuanha's face. How impressive and awesome was an existence that even a celestial king addressed as Lord. Unfortunately, the other party was unwilling to accept him as a disciple. But as long as he could take revenge, this was enough. Deal. He nodded. After you avenge your family, I will take you away from here, Ling Han said. Apart from containing the secret code of life, these people with specks of light in their minds also had their own unique characteristics. If he could unravel them, it would be very useful. Furthermore, this one was his descendant. Ling Han taught Wang Chuanha how to send out his divine sense to probe, and the two of them resonated, allowing Wang Chuanha to discover the existence of another ball of light in his body and obtain the information contained within. Wang Chuanha sent this information back to Ling Han, and Ling Han taught him how to cultivate. What was Ling Han's cultivation level, and how many natural treasures did he possess? Even a stupid pig would be able to become a celestial king if they were buried in endless resources. Just 7 days later, Wang Chuanha had reached the dividing soul tier. Ling Han had no intention of building a stable foundation for Wang Chuanha. Wang Chuanha did not have any outstanding natural talent in cultivation, and was just exceptionally lucky. For example, if Wang Chuanha had to choose 1 out of 2, 3, or even 1 out of 10,000, he would always be able to find the right one. If Ling Han allowed him to venture into an ancient site, it would probably be as easy as walking on flat ground for him. His specialty was that he was extremely lucky. The dividing soul tier was definitely enough for him to take revenge. Go. Ling Han waved his hand. He wanted to properly digest the secret code of life he had just obtained. Wang Chuanha kowtowed respectfully to Ling Han. 7 days ago, he would never have imagined that he could undergo such an earth-shattering change in just 7 days. Towards Ling Han, he was filled with gratitude, even if he also knew that what Ling Han had obtained from his mind was definitely extraordinary. To be able to help him avenge his blood feud was an unparalleled kindness. He left Prince Xian's manor and prepared to leave the city and return to Qianshui town. But just as he reached the city gate, he was stopped by someone. "Stop right there," one of the guards shouted. "You can't leave." Chapter 3060. 3060, you want to kill me? Chapter 3060. 3060, you want to kill me? 3060, you want to kill me? Wang Chuanha raised a brow and revealed a strong confidence. Why? If I told you to stay, just stay. Why are you asking so many questions? The guard said impatiently. Wang Chuanha thought for a moment and couldn't help but come to a realization. Is it Lei Dong? The only person he had offended here was Lei Dong. There was no need for others to take a little beggar like him to account. Since you know that you've offended young Master Lei, you still want to leave, the guard said, not even looking Wang Chuanha in the eye. All right, I'll wait for him, Wang Chuanha said. Since Lei Dong was asking for a beating, Wang Chuanha would oblige him. Although the Lei clan still had elites surpassing dividing soul tier, didn't Wang Chuanha still have Ling Han behind him? Not to mention anything else. Just Prince Ma Xian alone was enough to make the Lei clan not even dare to fart. Not long after, Lei Dong ran over. Little beggar, you're really good at hiding. Lei Dong was a little surprised. 7 days ago, he had been guarding the entrance of Prince Xian's manor. But after waiting for a long time, he still hadn't seen Wang Chuanha appear. He felt strange about this, and he couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he tried. Of course, he didn't believe that Wang Chuanha was the person Prince Xian was looking for. As expected, He had set up many spies in the city and quickly found this little beggar. "I told you that you would regret it." Lei Dong attacked brazenly and struck out with his palm, intending to kill Wang Chuanha. A hint of killing intent flashed across Wang Chuanha's eyes as he also struck out with his palm. Pung! Lei Dong instantly turned into a rain of blood. A severing mundane tear standing against a dividing soul tear would naturally die in one move. Although 7 days had passed in the outside world, Wang Chuanha had undergone almost 10 years of bitter cultivation under the acceleration of time. As his strength increased, his mentality had also changed. He was decisive and resolute. This was the temperament he had cultivated with Ling Han. Wang Chuanha did not even give him a second glance. He only said to the guard, "Are you still going to stop me?" The guard's entire body trembled as he hurriedly shook his head. He didn't want to die. "That's good then." Wang Chuanha turned around and walked out of the city. The guard was still filled with lingering fear. After being in a daze for a while, he finally remembered to report to the Lei clan. An outstanding member of the Lei clan had died, and he was a witness. If he didn't report it, he would definitely be skinned alive by the Lei clan. When the news reached them, the Lei clan was naturally enraged. Lei Qianqing, who was also Lei Dong's father, immediately rushed out, wanting to capture Wang Chuanha and kill him in front of his son's grave. He was an ascending origin tier, so his speed was extremely fast. With a flash, he had arrived at the city gate. Looking at the bloodstains on the ground, he couldn't help but feel great grief, and tears streamed down his face. He only had one son. "How dare you kill my son? Not only will I cut your corpse into pieces, but I will also find and kill all of your relatives within 9 generations." Lei Qianqing said viciously. "Sigh." A sigh suddenly sounded. "Who is it?" Lei Qianqing was shocked. He didn't realize that there was another person nearby. With his ascending origin tier power, most people would have fled far away in fear. How could anyone get so close? Ling Han slowly walked out and said, "Let the younger generations settle their own matters. Why are you interfering?" He was Wang Chuanha's ancestor. How could he watch Lei Qianqing hunt down his descendant? Lei Qianqing sized up Ling Han and couldn't help but frown slightly. He couldn't see through Ling Han's strength, but he was certain that Ling Han definitely wasn't a celestial king. Celestial kings had ribbons of iridescent light twining around their bodies, and this was the most obvious characteristic. Since he wasn't a celestial king, he was at most an ascending origin tier like him. What was there to be afraid of? "Judging from your tone, you seem to be the elder of the murderer who killed my son," he asked. Ling Han nodded. "That's right." "All right, then I'll kill you first." Lei Qianqing's gaze turned cold and killing intent surged. "Stop!" He was just about to move when he suddenly heard a shout, causing him to stop abruptly. A look of surprise appeared on his face, and he blurted out, "Lord Celestial King!" There was only one Lord Celestial King here, and that was Prince Ma Xian. The Lei clan was an ascending origin tier force. They were already very powerful, but in front of a Celestial King tier force, they were completely trash. If Prince Ma Xian really wanted to make a move on the Lei clan, he could easily destroy the Lei clan. Therefore, Lei Qianqing immediately became extremely respectful. He cupped his hands and bowed to Prince Ma Xian. "Greetings, Lord Ma." However, what happened next made Lei Qianqing's face turn green. Prince Ma Xian jogged over and knelt down in front of Ling Han. "This lowly one's rule was not strict enough, and actually caused offense to you, my lord. Please forgive me, my lord." "Holy fuck!" Lei Qianqing's face was filled with incredulity. That was a celestial king, the most powerful being in the world. Yet he actually knelt down and addressed this person as a lord, as if he was incomparably humble. If he had heard about this, he would definitely have laughed out loud and dismissed it as ridiculous. He would have treated it as a joke. However, when this scene happened before his eyes, Lei Qianqing only felt a bone-chilling coldness. Even a celestial king had to kneel and pay his respects. So who was this incomparably young man? He couldn't help but feel his legs go weak, and he directly knelt down. He wanted to call out, "Lord," but he couldn't say anything. It was too terrifying. Ling Han merely smiled faintly and said, "My lord, please don't interfere in the affairs of the younger generation, all right?" "All right, all right, all right." Lei Qianqing finally found some courage, because, judging from Ling Han's words, it seemed like he didn't want to make things difficult for the Lei clan and him anymore. Naturally, he felt as if a huge burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He only felt that his back was covered in cold sweat and his clothes were drenched. Ling Han nodded, turned around, and left. When Ling Han's figure disappeared, Lei Qianqing's entire body was paralyzed, and he flopped down on the ground. "Pa!" He was immediately slapped. Prince Ma Xian was glaring at him fiercely, as if he wanted him to swallow him alive. "My lord," Lei Qianqing's heart skipped a beat. "You bastard, I was almost killed by you." Prince Ma Xian flew into a rage and gave him a good beating. Naturally, Lei Qianqing could only scream in pain. He didn't even dare to defend himself. Fortunately, when Prince Ma Xian saw that Ling Han had spared him, he did not dare to beat Lei Qianqing to death. What if one day Ling Han had a sudden impulse and said that he wanted to personally deal with Lei Qianqing? Wouldn't Ma Xian be in trouble then? Scram! In the end, Prince Ma Xian kicked Lei Qianqing away. Out of sight, out of mind. It could be said that Lei Qianqing had escaped death twice and dragged his heavily injured body back to the Lei clan. In his heart, he was still thinking about how lucky he was to be able to survive being targeted by a celestial king and someone many times stronger than a celestial king. This was really not easy. At the thought of this, he actually felt a little smug. "Seventh Elder, what's wrong?" Seeing Lei Qianqing return bathed in blood, it was obvious that he was in an extremely miserable state. The members of the Lei clan were all shocked. "I'm fine. I'm fine." Lei Qianqing hurriedly waved his hand. He naturally couldn't take the initiative to bring up his scandal. He came up with some story and then closed a page on this matter. Chapter 3061. 3061, the Li clan's wedding. Chapter 3061. 3061, the Li clan's wedding. 3061, the Li clan's wedding. Ling Han naturally wouldn't take such a small matter to heart. He also left the city and followed behind Wang Chuanha. It wasn't that he couldn't protect this descendant from the city, but he wanted to go to Qianshui town to take a look. He came to the old site of the Wang clan. It had been 3 years since the tragedy. Naturally, the rivers of blood that had flowed there that day had long disappeared. The place had already turned back into a bustling area. However, it was not the Wang clan that occupied this place today, but the Li clan. Ling Han released his divine sense in a scan, and a strange expression couldn't help but appear on his face. What a coincidence it was today. It was the day of Li Jingchu's wedding. Her husband's family had a powerful background, and he was a disciple of a large sect. His name was Luo Guang. Was this Wang Chuanha's luck attribute at play? The Li clan could have married their daughter a day earlier or a day later, but simply chose to hold the wedding today. Ling Han did not make a move. He was merely tracing the origins of the Wang clan, wanting to know exactly what his descendants had experienced. At this moment, Wang Chuanha rushed over. Wang Chuanha had needed 3 years to leave this place in the past, but now he only used half a day to return. There was no other reason. His cultivation level had soared, and he had advanced from the heavenly body tier to dividing soul tier. How many times had his strength increased? To mention anything else, only severing mundane tiers were capable of flying. Just this point alone was enough to save him a lot of time. He was filled with emotion and was even more grateful to Ling Han. Without Ling Han, there wouldn't be the current him. So what revenge would there be to talk about? He would definitely be living in a corner somewhere, barely surviving and worrying about the Li clan's pursuit, right? 3 years had passed, and regardless of whether it was his abilities or appearance, he had changed greatly. Previously, he had still been a slightly inexperienced youth, but now he had become a slender young man, and his face had become more mature. Walking on this familiar street, no one actually recognized him as a remnant of the Wang clan. This gave Wang Chuanha the illusion that he had come to the wrong place. He would go home and take a look first. When he arrived at the old site of the Wang clan, he saw a joyous scene. Who was going to get married? He grabbed a random person and interrogated him. His gaze immediately turned fierce. It was Li Jingqiu, a name that he had deliberately suppressed in his heart, but it would flip up from time to bite at his heart. This important accomplice who had caused the deaths and destruction of his clan was actually getting married now. How could she? Wang Chuanha's expression immediately darkened. Fortunately, he had arrived in time. If it had been delayed until tomorrow, Li Jingqiu would have had to leave with her husband after the wedding and head to a large sect to become a disciple of that large sect. He looked up at the plaque on the door and strode forward. Everything would end today. Sir, your invitation? Someone stopped him. Wang Chuanha grinned. Why, you don't even recognize me? That person stared at Wang Chuanha and felt that this person looked somewhat familiar, but he couldn't recall who it was for a moment. My surname is Wang. Wang Chuanha added. Wang. That person's heart skipped a beat. In Qianshui town, the surname Wang was a taboo. Ah, you're Wang Chuanha. He finally remembered, mainly because he had never thought that the only straggler from the Wang clan who had slipped through the net would still dare to appear. What? Wang Chuanha, the only descendant of the Wang clan. Many people couldn't help but be shocked when they heard this. That young man from the Wang clan had actually returned. However, it had only been 3 years. How could Wang Chuanha's strength have changed? Wouldn't he just be courting death if he came back? It must be because of Li Jingqiu. That's right. When the Wang clan was destroyed, it was during Wang Chuanha and Li Jingqiu's wedding. Unexpectedly, after 3 years, Li Jingqiu will get married again. When Wang Chuanha found out about it, he naturally couldn't hold it in anymore. Sigh, no one would be able to tolerate this. The woman who married him back then destroyed his entire clan. Now, she's actually going to marry another man in the same place. How can this be tolerated? Hush, lower your voice. Do you want to die? Everyone whispered to each other. There was definitely no lack of people from Qianshui town attending the wedding banquet, so they naturally knew about this matter that happened only 3 years ago, not too far back in the past. Besides, the destruction of the Wang clan was an incomparably sensational event for a small place like Qianshui town. It would be mentioned even after 1,000 years passed. Wang Chuanha strode into the main hall. Stop right there. The Li clan guards at the entrance tried to stop him, but Wang Chuanha only released his power lightly. Pung, pung, pung. These guards were sent flying. How could they stop him? Huh. Upon seeing this scene, the guests were all greatly shocked. Could it be that Wang Chuanha had encountered a great opportunity in the past 3 years? They remembered that he had only been in the heavenly body tier back then and definitely hadn't had such battle prowess. Wang Chuanha strode forward, and behind him were many injured people who had fallen to the ground. The scene was quite lively. He was naturally very familiar with this place and quickly arrived at the main hall. Coincidentally, the bride had just been invited out and was about to bow with the groom. Next, she would be sent to the bridal chamber. Stop! Stop! Of course, the Li clan didn't only have a few guards. More people chased after him, making a commotion. This made the clan leader of the Li clan involuntarily reveal a dissatisfied expression as he looked towards the elders at the side. What kind of day is it today? It was the big day that Li Jingqiu was going to be married to Luo Guang, the seventh grandson of the third elder of the Red Flame sect. What kind of force was the Red Flame sect? It was at the Celestial King tier. Jingchu was really a lucky star. 2 years ago, she met Luo Guang by chance, and Luo Guang fell in love with her at first sight, starting a fierce courtship of her. To the Luo clan, they didn't want Luo Guang to marry such a mediocre wife. But who asked Luo Guang to like her? After coaxing and pestering them for 2 years, the Luo clan finally nodded and approved. However, the wedding would only be held in Qianshui town. After returning to the Red Flame sect, the Luo clan would not hold another wedding because they could not afford to lose face. Marrying such an ordinary woman, and you still wanted a big wedding? What a joke! However, to the Li clan, being able to climb up and get a connection to the Luo clan was already a blessing. This was because the Luo clan had an ascending origin tier ancestor, and the sect master of the Red Flame sect was a celestial king. An elder of the Li clan immediately stood up and shouted outside, "What is all the noise about?" "Fourth elder, the surviving member of the Wang clan, is here," a guard said breathlessly. "What?" The big shots of the Li clan were all stunned, and Li Jingchu, who was wearing a red veil, also trembled slightly. The groom beside her immediately sensed it. "Jingchu, I'll take care of everything," Luo Guang said, his eyes full of confidence and disdain. This was only a mere severing mundane tier clan, so it was only natural for them to make a fuss over some small matter. Even though he was only a severing mundane tier, he had countless rare treasures on him. He alone could annihilate a force like the Li clan. "Yes." Li Jingchu nodded and said, "Thank you, Luo Guang. I'm your husband. Your business is my business," Luo Guang said very gently. Li Jingchu leaned over slowly. "I know. You're good to me. Li clan, I'm here." Wang Chuanha had already walked into the main hall, and his gaze was fixed on the newly married couple in the red wedding attire. Chapter 3062. 3062, Collecting Debts. Chapter 3062. 3062, Collecting Debts. 3062, Collecting Debts. Wang Chuanha, why aren't you hiding in some ravine for the rest of your life? How dare you come here? A young man sneered. "Shoo!" He jumped out. His name was Li Bing, and he was the only son of an elder of the Li clan. He was already an eternal river tier. He knew that Wang Chuanha was only a heavenly body tier, so he was naturally happy to jump out at this time. This could be considered as standing up for Li Jingchu. This clan sister of his was not simple. When she entered the Red Flame sect in the future, she would be a disciple of a celestial king tier sect, and her future would be limitless. Therefore, this favor he had done for her would be very important. Wang Chuanha glanced at him. A mere eternal river tier was naturally not worthy of his attention. However, all members of the Li clan deserved to die. He clearly remembered that in the battle that day, the Li clan had all been mobilized. This Li Bing's hands were definitely stained with the blood of the Wang family. "How many members of the Wang clan have you killed?" Wang Chuanha asked balefully. Li Bing guffawed. He wanted to show off a little more, so he didn't make a move immediately. Instead, he counted with his fingers. 1, 2, 3, for at least 10. I killed them so happily that I didn't have time to count them. Wang Chuanha nodded. "All right, I'll cut you into 10 pieces before letting you die." "You really think of yourself as someone important," Li Bing said with a cold smile. He charged towards Wang Chuanha. Just fooling around with such a small fry a bit was enough. He didn't want to make the other clansmen unhappy. Wang Chuanha stretched out his hand, but he didn't seem to have used any ingenious techniques. However, Li Bing looked like he was possessed as he crashed into Wang Chuanha, and his neck fell directly into Wang Chuanha's hand. He was taken down in one move. Wang Chuanha raised his hand and slashed out a cold light. Then Li Bing's legs were chopped off. "Ah!" Li Bing screamed. His legs had been cut off, so it was only natural that he was in so much pain that tears flowed out of his eyes. Wang Chuanha raised his hand and delivered another palm strike. Li Bing lost another part of his body, and this time it was severed at the knee. However, since both of his legs were already severed, the amount of blood he spat out this time was much less. Ah! Li Bing continued to scream miserably. His face was covered in great beads of cold sweat, and he was in so much pain that he was about to faint. However, he remembered what Wang Chuanha had said earlier, that he had to be cut into 10 pieces before he could die. He couldn't help but feel like his heart was about to explode. Evil creature, you actually dare to commit murder in my Li clan's territory? One of the Li clan's big shots finally spoke. He raised his eyebrows and revealed a furious expression. The previous scene had happened too suddenly. Who would have thought that a minor character who was only at Heavenly Body Tier would actually be able to defeat an Eternal River Tier with a single strike? Could it be that this brat had obtained some sort of fortuitous encounter? Was there someone more powerful behind him? It was precisely because of these thoughts that their reactions were delayed for a moment. So they actually didn't save Li Bing immediately, causing him to suffer again. Wang Chuanha glanced at the big shot from the Li clan. His gaze was terrifyingly cold, causing the big shot to shiver all over. It was as if the blood in his body was about to freeze. Wang Chuanha retracted his gaze and waved his hand for the 3rd time. Following Li Bing's scream, his legs had completely disappeared. How dare you! The big shot from the Li clan flew into a rage out of humiliation. He was actually frightened by the gaze of a junior. How embarrassing. He roared and charged at Wang Chuanha. He was a severing mundane tier, and he instantly arrived in front of Wang Chuanha. However, Wang Chuanha merely lashed out with his leg, and the former was smashed to the ground with a thud. Fuck! Upon seeing this scene, everyone fell silent. Even Li Bing stopped screaming in pain, and his face was filled with shock. That was a severing mundane tier Grand Elder. Although he was only at the first severance, he had truly stepped into the level of an immortal. In theory, his lifespan was unlimited, and he could live forever. However, Wang Chuanha's kick had also taken care of him. Hiss! What kind of monster was this Wang Chuanha? All of a sudden, everyone in the Li clan looked as if they were facing a great enemy. Even Li Jingchu couldn't help but lift her red veil and look at the young man who was emitting killing intent. The entire hall was enveloped by that cold aura. Luo Guang couldn't help but humph. Although this was the Li clan's nemesis, he actually made a scene at his own wedding. This was naturally offending him greatly. Wang Chuanha, I've really underestimated you, the clan leader of the Li clan said. He paused for a moment. Let him go. I promise you that I'll let you leave freely. Clan leader. The clansmen of the Li clan were all unwilling. He came to make a scene, and can actually leave just like that. The clan leader of the Li clan waved his hand, and everyone immediately shut their mouths. In the Li clan, the clan leader possessed absolute authority. Firstly, he was the clan's leader, and secondly, his cultivation level had reached the peak stage of the 4th severance. In the cultivation world, wasn't the one with the bigger fists the one who spoke louder? Wang Chuanha laughed loudly, but there was no smile on his face, only endless menace. He stared at the clan leader of the Li clan and said, 3 years ago, my Wang clan had more than 1,000 people, and they were all slaughtered by your Li clan in a single night. How can such a blood feud be resolved with just a few words from you? The clan leader of the Li clan was not angry. He only said calmly, Oh, so you're here to take revenge today. That's right. Wang Chuanha nodded and looked at Li Jingchu. I still want to see what this TCH's heart is made of. She poisoned her newlywed husband's entire clan, and now she's wearing a wedding dress and remarrying someone else. How shameless could she be? Wang Chuanha, don't spout nonsense. Li Jingchu couldn't help but reprimand him. The man beside her was an important disciple of the Red Flame sect. Her future depended on today's marriage. If Luo Guang misunderstood, or even in fact despised her, she would be finished. Jingchu, let me. Luo Guang walked out. He was indeed worthy of being the successor of a celestial king-tier force. He had a graceful bearing and a demeanor that Wang Chuanha couldn't compare to. Wang Chuanha looked at this man with indescribable, complex feelings in his heart. Although 3 years had passed, and it had been 10 years for him, he had loved Li Jingchu so deeply back then. How could he let go of such a relationship, just like that? The deeper the love, the deeper the hatred, and vice versa. Wang Chuanha's former lover, the sinner who had caused the destruction of his clan, was actually going to marry another man, and Wang Chuanha was now facing this man. Naturally, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. However, the past could not be forgotten. Even if Li Jingchu knelt down and begged him, he would definitely not be soft-hearted. This woman didn't love him at all, and even destroyed the Wang clan. From the moment she took this step, the two of them were destined to become strangers to one another. Kneel down and commit suicide. Your death would be easier, Luo Guang said, but he was full of conceit. I can guarantee that this is the right choice for you. Otherwise, you will definitely regret it. Wang Chuanha shifted his gaze away from him. This was an irrelevant person, and he was here for revenge today. Li Clan, I'm here to collect the debt today. Chapter 3063. 3063, killed with a single punch. Chapter 3063. 3063, killed with a single punch. 3063, killed with a single punch. You're courting death. Luo Guang couldn't help but fly into a rage. He was a core disciple of the Red Flame sect, the successor of a mighty celestial king-tier force. Yet a nobody actually dared to ignore him. Are you very strong? However, looking at how young you are, you're at most a severing, mundane tier. I'll consider you a fourth severance, and how many such elites are there in the Red Flame sect? At best, even if you're a dividing soul tier, the Red Flame sect also has countless of them. Wang Chuanha glanced at him. I have no enmity with you, and I don't want to kill you. But if you continue to be so ungrateful, don't blame me for being ruthless. Luo Guang couldn't help but laugh in anger. Brett, do you know who I am? I'm Luo Guang, the Red Flame sect's Luo Guang. My grandfather is an elder of the Red Flame sect, a great elite of ascending origin tier, and my Red Flame sect master is a second heaven celestial king. If such a background was revealed before Wang Chuanha met Ling Han, it would definitely give this youth a huge fright. To say nothing of celestial kings, even ascending origin tiers and immortal palace tiers were giants to the Wang clan. They were simply invincible. But now, Wang Chuanha smiled faintly and took the initiative to grab Luo Guang. So what if Luo Guang was a member of a celestial king-tier sect? Wang Chuanha would just stretch out his hand and kill him. Do you really want to defy the heavens? Luo Guang sneered as he launched a palm strike at Wang Chuanha. Pung! As soon as the force behind their respective strikes came into contact, Luo Guang's expression changed. Wang Chuanha was too strong, far exceeding Luo Guang's limits. Luo Guang didn't dare to hesitate at all, and he immediately took out his treasures. Xiao! A piece of yellow paper floated out. Golden light flickered on the paper, emitting a terrifying might. This was a treasure bestowed upon him by the elders of the Luo clan. It could unleash attacks at the level of dividing soul tier, but it could only be used a limited number of times. It was considered an exhaustible item. As the golden light surged, it transformed into an ancient character that pressed down on Wang Chuanha. Wang Chuanha let out a long howl and met the attack with a punch. Pung! The character immediately crumbled, but Wang Chuanha also staggered and took more than 10 steps back. It was considered a draw. Luo Guang was shocked. He had already overestimated his opponent. but he did not expect Wang Chuanha not to be a fourth severance, but a dividing soul tear. What should I do? Although the talisman in his hand could match the other party, it was an exhaustible item. It could only be used a limited number of times. Once the power of the talisman was exhausted, how could he stop him? At this moment, his forehead was covered in cold sweat. "Sir, you have to think carefully about the consequences of going against the Red Flame sect," he said sternly. Wang Chuanha ignored him. Since they were already facing each other, he would definitely not show mercy. This was something Ling Han had taught him. Once he made a move, he would definitely not leave any future troubles behind. People like this would most likely seek revenge afterward, so he had to kill them. Boom! He threw another punch. Luo Guang had no choice. He could only continue to activate the talisman to block Wang Chuanha's attack. On the surface, the two of them seemed to be evenly matched. Luo Guang wasn't at a disadvantage. In fact, he was even more relaxed. He only threw out a talisman, appearing to be at ease. Thus, everyone from the Li clan cheered loudly for him, as expected of young Master Luo. Of course, an important disciple of the Red Flame sect is powerful. Pei, what important disciple? He's a core disciple. Yes. Many people began to suck up to him. If they could build a good relationship with Luo Guang and enter the Red Flame sect in the future, wouldn't that be like a fish leaping through the Dragon Gate? However, there were also people with good eyesight who fell in deep thought and shock. How long had it been? 3 years, just 3 years. But Wang Chuanha's strength had shockingly reached a height that even the Li clan looked up to. Who would believe that Wang Chuanha had cultivated to this level all by himself? Thus, Wang Chuanha definitely had a great elite backing him, or even a super powerful force. To be able to nurture Wang Chuanha in 3 years, just how terrifying was this elite or this force? Just the thought of it was terrifying. The more Wang Chuanha fought, the fiercer he became. After another dozen punches, the golden light on the talisman began to dim. **T. The members of the Li clan could clearly see it, and the cheers and shouts from before had all quieted down and eventually disappeared. How were they supposed to cheer? They were about to lose. Pung! As expected, after another 3 consecutive punches, the talisman shattered. Wang Chuanha's killing intent was already blazing as he threw a punch at Luo Guang. Since he had made his move, he would not show any mercy. "How dare you!" Luo Guang roared. "I'm a disciple of the Red Flame sect. If you kill me, it's equivalent to..." Pung! Wang Chuanha's punch had already landed. Under the suppression of the power of dividing soul tear, Luo Guang did not have the ability to retaliate at all, and was immediately blasted into a rain of blood. Everyone was so shocked that they were speechless. Luo Guang died just like that. That was a core disciple of the Red Flame sect. If he died here, Wang Chuanha would definitely not be able to escape death. However, the Li clan would also be buried with him. It's over, it's all over. The members of the Li clan all glared at Wang Chuanha with hatred. This was all because of him. He had to have done this on purpose. This guy wanted to drag the Li clan down with him. Wang. The rain of blood that Luo Guang had turned into suddenly glowed, forming a human face. This face was clearly incomparably furious. He stared at Wang Chuanha. "How dare you kill my grandson?" "I've already killed him. What's the point of spouting such nonsense?" Wang Chuanha said disdainfully. "Damn it, I'll come and take your life immediately," the face said. "Pa!" The image shattered and completely dissipated. Everyone in the Li clan felt lucky. If Wang Chuanha took the initiative to draw hatred, it might save the Li clan from being implicated. "Wang Quan he." Li Jingchu said word by word, throwing the red veil aside. The groom was already dead, so how could she get married now? If Luo Guang was dead, she would definitely be the one who was most disappointed. It wasn't because she loved Luo Guang so much, but because Luo Guang was just a stepping stone for her to enter the Red Flame sect. Without Luo Guang pulling the strings for her, how could she be qualified to enter a celestial king-tier sect with her talent? You're so ruthless! She glared at Wang Chuanha with incomparable hatred. I'm ruthless. Wang Chuanha sneered. Li Jingchu, how forgetful are you? Don't you remember how my Wang clan died back then? Let me remind you that they died because you poisoned them. So what? Li Jingchu didn't care at all. The Li clan and the Wang clan have been enemies for generations. No amount of unscrupulous means is enough. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame the Wang clan for being too stupid. Wang Chuanha revealed a sad smile. He hated himself for falling in love with such a vicious woman. Previously, he still hadn't understood why Li Jingchu would have done such a vicious thing. Was there some kind of difficulty that had forced her to do this? This was a sliver of hope that flashed through his mind. But now he knew that he had always been too naive. She had never fallen in love with him. It had all been an act to destroy the Wang clan. Chapter 3064. 3064 Arrival. Chapter 3064. 3064 Arrival. 3064 Arrival. A woman like her deserved to die. Wang Chuanha was about to make his move, but right at this moment he heard a long howl that sounded like a thunderclap. Pa pa pa! Most of the people fell to the ground. Everyone was astounded. Which elite had arrived? The commotion was too great. In the blink of an eye, an old man appeared in the hall. How strange! They had clearly never seen him before. Yet everyone felt a sense of familiarity. The elder's face was filled with anger, and he quickly fixed his gaze on Wang Chuanha. How dare you kill my beloved grandson? Humph, I was just nearby. Do you think you can leave so easily after killing him? Oh, everyone understood. They hadn't seen this old man before, but they felt a sense of familiarity because this old man was Luo Guang's grandfather, Luo Xiuxian. He had previously appeared, his image condensed from multiple light spots. This was an ascending origin tier great elite. Wang Chuanha remained calm and collected. It was impossible to say that he wasn't afraid. After all, the difference in strength was too great. However, after cultivating with Ling Han for 10 years, he had already learned to be calm. Even if the sky collapsed, he wouldn't be moved. Furthermore, Ling Han had once said that he only needed to be concerned about taking revenge, and that he didn't need to worry about anything else. Did he believe Ling Han's words? Of course, Wang Chuanha believed him. The other party was an existence that even Prince Ma Xian had to address as a lord. Would he lie to Wang Chuanha? However, under the current circumstances, how could it be that Ling Han could suddenly appear here? Greetings, my lord. Everyone knelt down and bowed to the elder. Luo Xiuxian completely ignored them. They were a bunch of trash with the highest level only being severing mundane tier, and they weren't even worthy of a second look from him. Brat, how do you want to die? He said indifferently, but his eyes were filled with hatred. Old geezer, stand aside. A voice suddenly sounded. Everyone was surprised. Hiss, who was this person? Didn't he know who Luo Xiuxian was? How dared he call him an old geezer and ask him to stand aside? He was truly audacious. A look of joy instantly appeared on Wang Chuanha's face. This was Ling Han. It turned out that he had been following him. He couldn't help but feel excited, because he knew what level of existence Ling Han was. Even if he wasn't very clear, he at least knew that he was awesome to the point where even celestial kings had to kneel and pay their respects. How could he not be touched by the fact that such a mighty figure had been protecting him? Luo Xiuxian looked over, and he couldn't help but sneer. And who are you? This was just a small severing mundane tier force. So how could there be so many people who didn't know what was good for them? Sigh, this place was too backward. Most likely, Everyone thought that severing mundane tears were the strongest existences, right? Ling Han shook his head. He was just about to slap this fellow to death when he let out a soft cry of surprise and looked into the distance. Boom! Colorful clouds danced in the sky, and a person walked over on a colorful cloud with ribbons of iridescent light wrapped around his body. Prince Ma Xian. When Luo Xiuxian saw this, his expression instantly became solemn. He could look down on everyone here, but in the face of a celestial king, he could only feel fear and trepidation. Xiu! Prince Ma Xian landed. His gaze swept across the area, and although it swept past Ling Han, he turned a blind eye to him. Ling Han had used some sort of trick to make it impossible for anyone else to discover him at all. Nephew, are you all right? His gaze stopped on Wang Chuanha. His expression looking like a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Fortunately, Wang Chuanha was fine. As a dignified celestial king, it was naturally impossible for him not to know that an ascending origin tier elite had appeared nearby. Originally, he didn't need to take this to heart. It was normal for someone to pass by or have some matters to attend to. He didn't need to make a fuss. However, the problem was that he was very concerned about Wang Chuanha. Previously, he had deliberately investigated Wang Chuanha and learned about the Wang clan. Thus, he could guess that Wang Chuanha was going to take revenge this time. He was afraid that if something happened to Wang Chuanha, he would be blamed by Ling Han. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. He immediately rushed over. As expected, his premonition was right. It seemed that Wang Chuanha was really targeted by this ascending origin tier. I'm fine. Thank you for your concern, Lord Ma. Wang Chuanha bowed slightly. In Ling Han's eyes, this was already very humble. It had to be known that the Ling clan could casually produce a handful of heavenly venerates, so celestial kings were really nothing. However, in everyone's eyes, it was as if the sky was about to collapse. That was a celestial king, yet he was actually so close to Wang Chuanha. Now that the truth was out, it was no wonder he became so powerful. It was because there was a celestial king who was nurturing him vigorously. In the hearts of these people, celestial kings were omnipotent. Thus, it was very normal for Wang Chuanha to completely transform in 3 years. Prince Ma Xian then looked at Luo Xiuxian and frowned. This has nothing to do with you. Leave. He waved a hand. When the same words came out of Ling Han's mouth, Luo Xiuxian would explode in anger. However, when they came out of Prince Ma Xian's mouth, Luo Xiuxian did not dare to get angry at all. He could only feel indignant. He argued, "My lord, this kid killed my grandson. Please let me take revenge." Prince Ma Xian glanced at him with pity, thinking to himself, "Let's not talk about the fact that he only killed your grandson. Even if it's your own son or father, you have to endure and accept it because you can't afford to offend the person behind him." Of course, as a dignified celestial king, he didn't need to explain anything to an ascending origin tier. He said indifferently, "Do you have any objections to me telling you to leave?" "I wouldn't dare." Luo Xiuxian gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, he said, "I'm an elder of the Red Flame sect, and the sect master of our sect is also a celestial king. Please reconsider the matter on this basis, my lord. Are you using the Red Flame sect to intimidate me?" Prince Ma Xian's expression immediately darkened, and he laughed coldly in his heart. To say nothing of a mere celestial king. So what if a heavenly venerate came? No matter how big the world was, Ling Han was the greatest there was. "Get lost," he reprimanded. Luo Xiuxian had no choice, so he could only turn around and leave. With such low strength, he didn't dare to challenge a celestial king. Seeing Luo Xiuxian run away so dejectedly, everyone was so shocked that their scalps went numb. For the sake of Wang Chuanha, Prince Ma Xian was actually willing to offend a celestial king tier force. How doting was he towards Wang Chuanha? Li Jingchu felt even more regretful. If she had been firm in her beliefs and stayed by Wang Chuanha's side back then, with Prince Ma Xian's attitude towards Wang Chuanha, it would have been a piece of cake for him to take her in as his personal disciple, right? And now, Luo Guang was dead. Everything was over. No, Luo Guang was dead, but Wang Chuanha was still alive. He was deeply favored by a celestial king. Her eyes flickered. At this moment, she had to make an extremely important decision. In an instant, she made up her mind. Chuanha, help me. She stretched out her hand towards Wang Chuanha. Actually, I was forced. I love you so deeply. How could I betray you? But I had no choice. The clan threatened me with my mother's life. If I didn't listen to their orders, my mother would be killed by them. This time, the clan threatened me with my mother's life and forced me to marry Luo Guang. Chuanha, save me. Save my mother. Chapter 3065. 3065 Illegitimate Son? Chapter 3065. 3065 Illegitimate Son. 3065 Illegitimate Son. Even Ling Han was slightly surprised. This woman could actually act so shamelessly. Was it really necessary to stoop so low in order to ride on a celestial king's coattail? However, he didn't lose his temper, and he simply observed the situation quietly. If Wang Chuanha showed indecisiveness, and if he showed this kind of woman undeserved sympathy, then Ling Han wouldn't have the time nor effort to give this descendant much help. He would simply help him get to the ninth heaven before letting him be. Li Jingchu! The members of the Li clan roared. They were filled with fury. They could understand the fact that she wanted to live. However, she couldn't push all the blame onto them. Kill them, Chuanha! Kill them! Li Jingchu shouted. A sinister expression flashed across her pretty face, ruining her beauty. There was savageness on her face as she yelled, "Kill them all, and then I'll be able to leave with you. We can live together and care for each other forever." She put on a pitiful expression and continued, "Chuanha, didn't you always want to marry me? I'll accept your proposal today." Wang Chuanha remained silent. After a while, he shook his head and said, "Do you take me for a 3-year-old child? Or perhaps you think I'm still the foolish youth from 3 years ago?" He paused for a moment before spitting with soaring killing intent. "I've come here to exact revenge today. Those who have the blood of my Wang clan on their hands don't even think of escaping. Li Jingchu, as one of the main culprits. Even dying 100 times is not enough to repent for your sins." Li Jingchu's imposing aura instantly deflated, like a balloon. She didn't dare to challenge the furious Wang Chuanha, and she could only put on an even more pitiful expression as she said, "Wang Chuanha, just forgive me once, okay? I'll definitely serve you well in the future." Revolting. Wang Chuanha said coldly, "Shua, shua, shua." With a few swings of his blade, Li Bing was immediately cut into a dozen pieces. Those at the Eternal River tier had powerful life forces, so Li Bing didn't die right away even though he had been reduced to such a miserable state. The severed pieces of his body continued to squirm, and it was as if they were worms wriggling on the ground. This was a bloody and terrifying scene. Wang Chuanha lashed out again, grabbing another member of the Li clan and asking in a baleful voice, "How many members of the Wang clan did you kill?" The person in his hand was so terrified that he directly suffered a mental breakdown, with his eyes rolling into his head and a warm liquid running down his legs. "I won't grant you such an easy death." Wang Chuanha sneered as he restricted the person's cultivation and tossed them aside. "Run!" the clan leader of the Li clan shouted. "Everyone go in different directions. Even though this ungrateful brat is extremely powerful, there's only one of him, after all. He won't be able to catch us all." The members of the Li clan immediately started to flee in different directions. However, they quickly discovered that they couldn't run out of this hall no matter what. Meanwhile, those outside the hall couldn't run outside the courtyard, and those outside the courtyard couldn't run out of the town. What in the world was going on? Was this also that ungrateful brat Wang Chuanha's doing? Wang Chuanha turned to Prince Ma Xian and clasped his hands in respect, saying, "Thank you for the help, Lord." Indeed, he wasn't powerful enough to unleash such an ability yet. However, celestial kings could use such abilities with ease. Prince Ma Xian nodded with a smile and said, "It's no trouble at all." They were truly done for. Even a celestial king had become involved, so not even a dog from the Li clan would be able to make it out of this place alive today. Otherwise, that would be a great humiliation for the celestial king involved. Thus, the Li clan was definitely beyond saving. They were as dead as could be. Wang Chuanha resolutely lashed out, killing anyone who had participated in the battle 3 years ago. He would cut them into as many pieces as the number of people they had killed. This was genuinely cruel and merciless. He started killing the more unimportant members of the Li clan first, and it was only natural that he would leave the clan leader and Li Jingchu for the last. Only this way could he maximize the elation he felt from exacting revenge. Ling Han shook his head slightly upon seeing this. He had never experienced the excruciating pain of having his clan massacred before. Even though the Wang clan was descended from his bloodline, they were already many generations down, and he had never met them before, either. Thus, even though he felt furious, he couldn't feel anywhere near as wrathful as Wang Chuanha. To Ling Han, these people were his descendants in name only. To Wang Chuanha, however, these people were his family who he lived with and cared about. So how could their feelings be compared? Ling Han could understand Wang Chuanha's thirst for revenge. However, he still felt like Wang Chuanha was taking things a little too far. Perhaps there had always been a beast hidden in this young man's heart, and following the destruction of the Wang clan, this beast was finally set free and allowed to engulf Wang Chuanha's true nature. Or perhaps this was his nature to begin with. Ling Han decided that he had to give his descendant a few lessons. Otherwise, this brat would eventually go mad one day. Inside the hall, all of the members of the Li clan had already collapsed to the ground, helpless and in despair. Faced with such a situation, what else could they do but wait for death? Only Li Jingchu remained stubborn and unwilling to give up. She stood there and spoke by herself, recounting all of her encounters and interactions with Wang Chuanha, attempting to sway him. Wang! A powerful aura suddenly crashed over, directly shattering the defensive barrier that Prince Ma Xian had erected. Immediately afterward, a person abruptly appeared in the hall. However, one surprise would immediately turn into understanding when they saw the 2 ribbons of iridescent light around his body. It was only natural that he could enter with such ease, because he was a second heaven celestial king. The celestial king clasped his hands and greeted, "Brother Ma!" Prince Ma Xian also looked over. He furrowed his brows slightly and asked in an uncertain voice, "Brother Su? The Red Flame sect leader Su Fei?" "That's right," the second heaven celestial king said with a loud laugh. Prince Ma Xian's heart skipped a beat. However, his expression remained calm as he asked, "For what purpose has Brother Su come?" "Come on, Brother Ma, this is quite cold of you," Su Fei said with a shake of his head. "What did you just do to an elder from my sect? Did you forget already?" A glimmer of hope appeared in the eyes of the collapsed members of the Li clan. In fact, even Li Jingchu shut her mouth and stopped speaking. The situation was potentially changing. "Oh, won't you look at my terrible memory," Prince Ma Xian said with a chuckle. "So that's what Brother Su has come for. However, I don't recall ever wounding an elder from your esteemed sect." "Indeed," Su Fei replied with a nod. "However, Elder Luo's grandson died a miserable death because of this. As the sect leader of the Red Flame sect, it naturally wouldn't make sense for me to ignore this. Brother Ma, please hand the culprit over. I'll invite you over for a drink in a few days, and we can chat to our heart's content then." Prince Ma Xian spread his hands and said, "Culprit? What culprit? I don't know what you're talking about." "Him. It's him." The members of the Li clan surprisingly started to roar. They all pointed at Wang Chuanha. This was their only sliver of hope right now, so they were willing to ignore even the threat from Prince Ma Xian. Li Jingchu took things even further, sobbing, "Lord Celestial King, I just got married to Luo Guang. Yet, after laying eyes on my beauty, this depraved beast actually dared to unleash violence on my wedding day. Please deliver justice, Lord Celestial King." Tears streamed down her face, and she appeared as delicate and pitiable as could be. However, would Su Fei be moved because of this? Thinking so would be looking down on celestial kings. Meanwhile, Prince Ma Xian frowned at what he saw. He hadn't imagined that these people would be able to muster such courage when granted a sliver of hope. They actually dared to utter such words before him. There was a faint smile on Su Fei's face as he quietly looked at Prince Ma Xian. Prince Ma Xian contemplated things for a moment before saying, "This young man is of great importance, so it's best that brother Su stays out of this." "Oh, perhaps he's brother Ma's illegitimate son then?" Su Fei chuckled. Chapter 3066. 3066. Manifesting Spiritual Qi. Chapter 3066. 3066. Manifesting Spiritual Qi. 3066. Manifesting Spiritual Qi. Pa! Su Fei was immediately slapped across the face. This was a crisp and loud slap that immediately caused the color to drain from his face. This was naturally a painful slap. More important than this, however, was the fact that he didn't even know who had slapped him. Just thinking about this caused a cold chill to run down his spine. Witch, Lord has come. Please forgive me for not welcoming you, Su Fei said. He didn't dare to shout in anger, and he instead lowered his voice in a subservient manner. Prince Ma Xian's heart jolted in shock as well. Perhaps it's him, he thought to himself. This slap was to punish your toxic tongue. Do you have any complaints? Ling Han asked. Ling Han initially didn't want to interfere. However, who told Su Fei to accuse Wang Chuanha of being Prince Ma Xian's illegitimate son? To carelessly change someone's ancestry like this, was this not asking for a slap? Su Fei felt like crying at this moment. He had merely said this in jest, yet he had somehow managed to draw great calamity upon himself. He wailed in grief in his mind, yet he didn't dare to let his emotions show on his face. Instead, his expression became solemn as he said, "Yes, you were correct to punish me. I'll definitely keep this lesson in mind." "All right, off you go then," Ling Han said. However, Su Fei wasn't willing to give up so easily. "Lord, may I have the honor of seeing your appearance?" "Pa!" He was immediately slapped across the face again. Prince Ma Xian chuckled coldly when he saw this. Even though he couldn't see Ling Han, either, he had already guessed the identity of this mysterious person. Just how freakishly powerful is Ling Han? Him speaking to you is already giving you enough face, yet you still want him to show himself? He said in his mind. What a joke. He's a heavenly venerate. Su Fei finally gave up all thought of resistance after suffering this blow. He had already been prepared this time, yet he had still been mysteriously slapped by that person. It was abundantly clear that the person was more powerful than him, far more powerful than him. He couldn't provoke this person. He bowed to the sky before turning around to leave. He would leave this troubled place forever and never return again. Wang Chuanha also retracted his gaze. He knew that the mysterious person was definitely Ling Han. After all, only Ling Han was capable of wielding such magnificent power. He continued to slaughter the members of the Li clan, interrogating them before hacking them into pieces. When he came across those who hadn't participated in the battle at that time, he would simply cripple their cultivation before tossing them aside. He would spare their life. Yet, in this world, was this not the same as being killed? Ungrateful brat, your cruelty today will destine you to death by someone else's hand one day, the clan leader of the Li clan roared. At this moment, only he and Li Jingchu were still alive. You need to die 100 times, Wang Chuanha said coldly. He started to carefully dice the clan leader into small pieces. Even Prince Ma Xian couldn't help but find this cruel. Killing someone was as simple as separating their head from their body. Wang Chuanha was taking things too far. However, Ling Han was nearby, so how would he dare to interfere? Li Jingchu wet herself in fright, with her pretty face becoming deathly pale. The clan leader suffered a truly agonizing fate, with his body diced into 100 pieces, not one piece more and not one piece less. However, his cultivation meant that he wouldn't die straight away, and he could only suffer in unbearable pain as his blood flowed across the ground. This was a truly horrifying sight. Prince Ma Xian had already turned his head around to avoid looking at this. If Ling Han weren't present, he would leave even if didn't stop Wang Chuanha. Now, however, he could only tolerate his disgust as he stood there. In reality, even Ling Han was frowning slightly as he observed the situation. Perhaps he had genuinely raised a demon. After the clan leader of the Li clan drew his final breath, Wang Chuanha turned around to look at Li Jingchu. Don't kill me! Don't kill me! Li Jingchu shrieked as she prostrated on the ground and furiously kowtowed. Her hair disheveled, and she looked much like a lunatic as she begged. Chuanha, I'm willing to do anything for you. I don't ask to be your wife, and I can even be your maid or woman. Pooh! She immediately fell silent. This was because a sword had directly pierced through her mind. Wang Chuanha sheathed his blade, a complicated expression on his face. He had already exacted revenge, so why wasn't he feeling any joy at all? Let's go, Ling Han said as he walked over. He grabbed Wang Chuanha and directly opened a fissure in the void, stepping in and traveling through the dimensions. Respectful farewell, my lord, Prince Ma Xian said respectfully the moment before the spatial fissure closed. Only heavenly venerates were capable of opening fissures in the void. Those below the heavenly venerable tier could only open fissures in space, but not fissures in the barriers around the dimensions. Several months later, Ling Han returned to the profound negative realm with Wang Chuanha. Here, he truthfully explained the origins of the Wang clan to him. Greetings, old ancestor, Wang Chuanha said as he fell to his knees. He respectfully bowed and paid his respects to Ling Han. Ling Han sighed and asked, Do you blame me? I wouldn't dare, Wang Chuanha replied with his head still lowered. He said that he didn't dare, not that he didn't. Ling Han waved his hand and said, From today onward, you can change your name to Ling Chuanha. Ancestor, without the blessing of my parents, Chuanha wouldn't dare to change his surname. Wang Chuanha was unexpectedly stubborn. The knot in his heart was extremely tight. Ling Han thought for a moment before saying, All right, suit yourself then. He couldn't continue to spend time and effort on this descendant forever. After returning to the ancestral grounds of the Ling clan, he would ask Ling Jianxue to deal with this matter. Meanwhile, he would enter seclusion. He had obtained another secret code of life, and he still had yet to fully digest it. This time he spent a lengthy 300 million years in seclusion. Tiny wisps of spiritual qi appeared on each of Ling Han's dimensions. Spiritual qi. This was the foundation of cultivation and the root of cultivators' power. There were some powerful beings who would be at the celestial king tier the moment that they were born. Thus, they could skip the process of refining spiritual qi and directly start accumulating source power. To most beings, however, spiritual qi was the foundation of their cultivation. A look of delight appeared on Ling Han's face. The manifestation of spiritual qi in his dimensions meant that they would instantly start to advance several times quicker than before. He performed some calculations, and he found that he only needed around 10 billion years to elevate all of his dimensions into high-tier, high-level dimensions. This was simply astounding. At that time, he would perhaps be powerful enough to rival or even suppress Hysteria. Moreover, he would only be at the 6th tier, being able to suppress Hysteria, the most powerful enemy and the most powerful being in the world, while only at the 6th tier. Who could believe this? The secret code of life can be viewed as the key to opening the door to the 8th type of power. This secret code also has a strong affinity with the power of dimension. So after obtaining it, I've technically already advanced to the 7th tier. It's just that I haven't actually obtained the 6th fundamental particle yet. 10 billion years. Give me another 10 billion years, and Hysteria will no longer be able to act with such wantonness. Even if Ling Han still couldn't kill Hysteria at that time, he would at least be able to suppress it comprehensively. He could then slowly cultivate to the 7th tier. When he succeeded, could anyone still remain undying and indestructible before him? But where did this spiritual qi come from? Ling Han was extremely curious. All forms of power had to come from somewhere, and they naturally couldn't appear out of thin air. This was just like how 1st tier heavenly venerates wouldn't be able to extract the unique power of other dimensions. After losing their source of power, they would slowly grow weaker and weaker. Even though 2nd tier heavenly venerates would only be suppressed to the 1st tier, this was still relying on the fact that they could extract some fundamental power. At the end of the day, they still needed a source of power. Ling Han continued to cultivate in seclusion, and he became increasingly interested in the origins of spiritual qi. As he deduced the heavenly venerable seals, he continued to ponder the origin of spiritual qi. Doing 2 things at once indeed affected his efficiency. However, it wasn't by very much. Another 400 million years passed, and Ling Han finally made a discovery. Chapter 3067, 3067, Facing Hysteria Head-On. Chapter 3067, 3067, Facing Hysteria Head-On. 3067, Facing Hysteria Head-On. Where did spiritual qi come from? The answer to this question was surprisingly simple: the void and fundamental power. The dimensions would interact with the void, extracting fundamental power and accumulating it in their cores. The dimensions would then channel this power, and as if becoming alive, they would eject this power in another form, spiritual qi. Thus, even though fundamental power and spiritual qi were different, there was indeed some relationship between them. Everything is related to the void and intimately related to the boundless power in the void. In this sense, the unique powers of the dimensions can also be viewed as belonging to fundamental power. They've simply undergone a transformation in the dimensions. That being the case, the 8th type of power is still fundamentally a power of dimension and a fundamental power. It's just that it's countless times more powerful. My body can be viewed as a Genesis world. So will that allow me to create another void? After all, this is the origin of all power. Or can I perhaps accommodate the void directly? Ling Han was slightly stunned by his own delusional ideas. Even Hysteria only dared to engulf the Genesis world, and not the void. The void was far too large, and no being had ever been able to reach the edges of this plane. It wouldn't be surprising even if 1,000 or 10,000 Genesis worlds existed in the void. Forget about this. I should focus my effort on elevating the dimensions in my body to high-tier, high-level dimensions. Only by doing this will I possess the power to genuinely rival Hysteria. I also need to find extermination as well. She's still in possession of a secret code of life. However, obtaining this secret code of life will be useless if I don't have enough dimensions in my body. Ling Han exited seclusion once to check on the cultivation of his friends and relatives. Those who had advanced to the heavenly venerable tier before made almost no progress. The higher one's cultivation level, the longer it would take one to make any progress. Of course, this was unless they came across some rare opportunity. Meanwhile, the boundless resources provided to the Ling clan enabled the new emergence of tens of thousands of celestial kings. Right now, The Ling clan could completely be regarded as the #1 clan in the world. Even the established clans of the 7th tier elites couldn't compare to it. However, the members of the Ling clan still kept a relatively low profile because of the threat from extermination. "Where's Wang Chuanha?" Ling Han asked. "That brat," Ling Jianxue said with a strange expression. "His fortune is truly unimaginable. His cultivation talent is clearly nothing special, yet he's somehow able to encounter rare opportunities one after another. After all these years, he's already advanced to the heavenly venerable tier." Even Ling Han was astonished. Compared to his children and his grandchildren, he honestly hadn't put too much effort into raising Wang Chuanha. Yet, Wang Chuanha was still able to become a heavenly venerate? This was truly remarkable. Even though Ling Han could kill a 6th tier elite with a single finger now, he was still unable to help a 9th heaven celestial king advance to the heavenly venerable tier. This was something beyond the regulations, something that pertained to fundamental power. Wang Chuanha's cultivation talent was nothing special, and in order to let him exact revenge as soon as possible, Ling Han further hadn't attempted to stabilize his cultivation foundations. That being the case, it should have been difficult for him to even become a celestial king. So how had he suddenly become a heavenly venerate? Was he truly this fortunate? Ling Han frowned and said, "That brat has vicious tendencies, and he might even blame us for his clan being massacred. Keep an eye on him, and don't let him cause any trouble." "All right, I understand," Ling Jianxue replied with a nod. Ling Han continued to cultivate in seclusion. Another 5 billion years passed, and he had already managed to deduce all of the 4th grade and 3rd grade heavenly venerable seals. This allowed his cultivation speed to increase by countless folds again. "Most of my dimensions have already been elevated to high-tier, high-level dimensions, and I'm countless times more powerful than when I last battled against Hysteria. And add to that the explosive power of the 3rd grade heavenly venerable seals, and I should be powerful enough to rival Hysteria now. Let me take a look at the realm battlefield first. I need to make sure that Shatter Mountains and the others are working hard. In addition to that, I also want to find out about Extermination's current situation." Ling Han exited seclusion and headed toward the realm battlefield. He went to the secondary battlefield first, and after so many years, the mother trees had naturally recovered their numbers already. They gave birth to a relentless enemy army, leading to huge casualties for the defenses. Ling Han directly charged into Hysteria's realm and wantonly destroyed everything in his path. Only after doing this did he casually leave and enter the main battlefield. To his disappointment, however, Chongyan and the others had already fled. Not only had the 5 of them fled, but even Golden Silk Moth and 10,000 Shadows were nowhere to be seen. Only Lin Luo and the 6 other heavenly venerates remained to painfully defend against the enemy invasion. However, Hysteria was far too powerful, and a simple swing of its tentacle would immediately send the heavenly venerates flying. They were almost completely unable to slow down Hysteria's advance. The main battlefield was rapidly falling to enemy advance. If this continued, the main battlefield would only be able to hold on for a maximum of a few billion more years. After that, the profound negative realm would become a scrumptious meal for Hysteria. Ling Han released a battle cry before charging over and swinging his fists. Whoosh! He was extremely quick, and he transformed into a streak of light as he charged at Hysteria. Boom! A terrifying shock wave blasted into the surroundings as his fist collided with Hysteria. Pung, pung, pung. Lin Luo and the others were sent flying back like puppets. Fortunately, the bodies of 7th tier elites were indestructible, so they didn't suffer any wounds. Ling Han, they exclaimed in unison. What did they just see? Ling Han had swung a fist and forcefully blocked one of Hysteria's attacks. Gasp! There was someone in the world who could actually rival Hysteria. Even more unfathomable than this was the fact that Ling Han was only at the 6th tier. 6th tier. Good heavens! Just how devastatingly powerful would he become when he advanced to the 7th tier? However, Ling Han knew that the biggest benefit of him advancing to the 7th tier would be his body becoming indestructible and him gaining the ability to raise the dimensions in his body to the transcendent level. As for strength, in reality, he wouldn't become much more powerful in the short term. This was because the greatest source of his power was the powers of dimension, something that wouldn't rise in level simply because he advanced to the 7th tier. Instead, this was something that he needed to spend a long time cultivating and nurturing. Thank you for all your hard work, seniors, Ling Han said. He was radiating with an indomitable spirit as he continued. From today onward, we'll turn defense into offense and drive hysteria out from this realm. If it had been someone else saying this, their words would have been treated as nothing more than a joke. Now, however, Ling Han's incredible feat of blocking Hysteria's attack gave them no option but to trust him. He had the right to utter such words. Charge! The heavenly venerates roared with renewed vigor. They had defended this place for so many years, and at long last they had finally waited until the arrival of someone who could turn the tables. Ling Han. Hysteria shrieked using its high-pitched spiritual waves. It was filled with rage and regret. After failing to kill Ling Han last time, it understood that it had lost its final chance to wipe this person from the face of the world. Sure enough, Ling Han was charging over again, and he was now powerful enough to face it head-on. Hysteria, the era belonging to you has already come to an end. Ling Han bellowed as he unleashed another powerful attack. The 7 ultimate elites assisted him from the sidelines. Even though they were far weaker than Hysteria, they were still 7th tier elites after all, so they could ultimately still provide a little help. In any case, they were indestructible and undying, so they could completely be used as human punching bags. Chapter 3068. 3068, A Stunning Turn of Events. Chapter 3068. 3068, A Stunning Turn of Events. 3068, A Stunning Turn of Events. Boom, boom, boom. Ling Han was undoubtedly the main force in the battle against Hysteria. Piss off, he roared as his body lit up. He channeled all of his 3rd-grade heavenly venerable seals, causing his power to increase 6,000-fold. Even Hysteria was unable to withstand his furious attack, and its tentacle was forcefully sent flying. When Ling Han finished unleashing his explosive power, Hysteria had already been pushed back 350,000 kilometers. The 7 ultimate elites were all beside themselves with excitement. After fighting Hysteria for so many years, it had only ever been them who had been forced to retreat by Hysteria. They had never once managed to hold their ground. But now, they were pushing Hysteria back. This was the first time in history. This caused them to shake with excitement, so much so that even their heads went numb. 7th tier heavenly venerates were also people. They also had emotions. Ling Han channeled his 4th-grade heavenly venerable seals. Even though his power increase fell down to only 5,000-fold, this was still enough for him to ferociously charge forward and continuously force Hysteria back. This time, Hysteria was forced to retread 250,000 kilometers. Ling Han then channeled his 5th-grade heavenly venerable seals. The combination seals all started to circulate together, smashing into Hysteria and forcing it to retreat more than 1 million kilometers. This was a stunning feat, a historical feat. After unleashing his explosive power, Ling Han stood still and asked in a calm voice, "Still want to continue?" Hysteria waved its tentacles around. Its situation was unique, and the fact that it had transformed into a dimension allowed it to become far more powerful than normal. However, this also caused it to lose some abilities, such as channeling heavenly venerable seals. Before today, this hadn't been an issue at all. One could only channel heavenly venerable seals for a limited amount of time, and it further took a great deal of time for one to recharge the energy of the seals. Meanwhile, Hysteria possessed a crushing advantage over the 7th tier heavenly venerates, so it didn't matter even if it couldn't channel heavenly venerable seals. Now, however, Ling Han's raw power was already able to rival it. That being the case, it became extremely critical whether it could channel heavenly venerable seals or not. If this continued, it would be pushed back time and time again, all the way until it was forced from the two-realm battlefield. At that time, it would be Ling Han who charged into its dimension, preventing it from waging another war against the transcendent dimension. Impossible! You can't be this powerful! Hysteria roared in a booming voice. Unless you obtain the secret of the world. Secret of the world. Secret code of life. Ling Han's heart jolted. The world's core was most likely a non-existent manner. This was something that extermination had made up to trick him, Chongyan, and the others. Now, however, Hysteria was mentioning some secret of the world. Ling Han's unfathomable power came from the ball of light in his mind. Theoretically speaking, this was a secret that could never be discovered. One could never discover the ball of light in their own mind. In fact, one could only discover it if they managed to resonate with another person. In other words, it was essentially impossible. However, due to a string of coincidences, Ling Han had indeed discovered this secret and unlocked this ability. Yes, that's definitely the case. Hysteria exclaimed, its emotions fluctuating and agitated. Who would have thought, after planning for countless years, it was actually snatched away by you first? Is this so-called secret of the world the mysterious ball of light in one's mind? Ling Han asked. That's right. This ball of light contains the secret of the Genesis world's origin, and obtaining it will allow me to charge through the barrier and leap out of this small pond, Hysteria replied. Lin Luo and the others couldn't help but feel astonished upon hearing this. Leap out of this small pond. What did this mean? What lies beyond this small pond? Ling Han asked. He recalled the time when Hysteria had disdainfully called him a frog at the bottom of a well. This caused his mind to wander, and he speculated whether more Genesis worlds lay in the void. Now that Hysteria was actively mentioning it, Ling Han naturally had to seize the opportunity to ask. Otherwise, it would be much harder to extract this information from Hysteria when it eventually calmed down. Perhaps it's a bigger world, or perhaps it's a vast expanse of void, Hysteria replied. Even Hysteria doesn't know. Ling Han smiled and asked, You're willing to destroy the Genesis world for the sake of this unknown. So what if I am? Hysteria replied unsympathetically. Since I know there's a chance for a more spectacular world to lie beyond this small pond, why would I want to be trapped in this place forever? Even if it's nothing more than a dark cage, how can I be willing to give up if I don't at least take a look for myself? Ling Han fully understood the situation now. Hysteria was naturally engulfing the dimensions to increase its own power. At the same time, however, it was also aiming to engulf those who had a ball of light in their minds. Once Hysteria engulfed these beings, the secrets that were contained inside the balls of light would also be obtained by it. After so many years, it was very likely that Hysteria had already obtained some secret codes of life. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to create 6th-tier monsters. However, Hysteria also had its own limitations. After transforming into a dimension, its base power was indeed much higher than anyone else. However, this also restricted it from creating any more dimensions. Instead, it could only continue to strengthen its own dimension. Qualitatively speaking, this kind of growth was superior to that of anything else. However, Ling Han could completely rely on an advantage in quantity to suppress or even surpass this. Hysteria was unable to rival Ling Han even after toiling for so many years. This was only normal. After all, becoming a dimension had indeed strengthened Hysteria. At the same time, however, it had also placed a pair of shackles on it, preventing it from moving around as it pleased. Meanwhile, Ling Han was truly blessed by fortune, first encountering Wally and then taking in a disciple who was similar to himself. This allowed him to finally discover the secrets of his own body, secrets that should have never been revealed. Everyone should have curiosity in their minds. However, I can't allow countless people to die simply to satisfy your thirst for an answer to your curiosity, Ling Han announced. He dashed forward and started to pummel Hysteria again. In the past, he had always been suppressed and pushed back by Hysteria. This had caused him to be filled with frustration. Now, it was finally his turn to return the favor. He ferociously launched an attack. However, without the explosive power of the heavenly venerable seals, he was in fact unable to suppress Hysteria. Even with the help of Lin Luo and the others, he was only able to reach a stalemate with Hysteria. After all, Hysteria was far too powerful. Every once in a while, however, when the heavenly venerable seals finished recharging, Ling Han would be able to unleash explosive power and forcefully push Hysteria back. Even though this was a slow process, Lin Luo and the other ultimate elites were still filled with uncontrollable excitement. This was because if this continued, there would eventually come a day when Hysteria was finally ejected from the profound negative realm. At that time, they would only need to stand guard at the entrance and never need to worry about Hysteria invading them again. In the midst of their intense battle, Ling Han, Lin Luo, and the others suddenly felt several powerful auras rapidly dashing over. In the next moment, Chong Yen and the 4 other ultimate elites from the previous era appeared before them. Beside them were 10,000 shadows and the other 7th tier, heavenly venerates. Had they come over to provide help, now that victory was within reach? Were they doing this to leave a good name for themselves in the history books? They were truly skilled at taking advantage of the situation. However, before they could even finish these thoughts, they saw the 7 ultimate elites furiously charge over, their targets being Lin Luo and the others. Pung, pung, pung. This was a completely unexpected turn of events, and Lin Luo and the others were immediately sent flying after being caught off guard. Fortunately, those at the 7th tier were indestructible and undying. Thus, they were uninjured even though they were sent flying. Chong Yen, Golden Silk Moth, have you too gone crazy? Xian Fu roared in a harsh voice. What in the world were they doing? Were they helping Hysteria? Chong Yen and the others didn't answer. Instead, they continued to unleash attacks to draw the attention of Lin Luo and the others. However, Ling Han was the main force among them, so Hysteria would have no option but to retreat as long as he continued to unleash the might of his heavenly venerable seals. This would remain the case even with the additional annoyance of Chong Yen and the others. Boom! A supremely powerful aura swept over them, after which a slender and elegant figure materialized. It was as if they had strode over from the ancient past, and they brought with them a devastating power as they launched a strike at Ling Han. Extermination. Chapter 3069. 3069 Two enemies joining forces. Chapter 3069. 3069 Two enemies joining forces. 3069 Two enemies joining forces. The true body of extermination, the being who had obliterated the Genesis world of the previous era. Now, some unknown persons will have taken control of this body and unleashed a devastating power. This was a power far beyond the peak stage of the 7th tier. In fact, this was a power that could almost rival Hysteria's. Whoosh! Hysteria also launched an attack at the same time, swinging a tentacle at Ling Han. Ling Han threw a fist to meet their attacks. Boom! His body shuddered, and he retreated 1,500 kilometers. However, Hysteria and Extermination didn't fare any better, with Hysteria's tentacles sent flying and Extermination also sent soaring through the air. What's going on? The two beasts are actually joining forces? Ling Han proudly stood in the sky and peered down at Hysteria and Extermination. He then stared at Extermination and asked, "The 7 of them were coaxed here by you." Extermination also stood in the sky, with her clothes fluttering in the gusts of energy. She was breathtakingly beautiful. So what if they were? And so what if they weren't? She retorted. Ling Han shook his head and remarked, "I'm truly becoming more and more confused. You people are actually trying to protect Hysteria? What? Have you all gone stupid as well?" Extermination looked at Ling Han and said disdainfully, "It's impossible to have a meaningful conversation with someone as ignorant as yourself." Ling Han roared with laughter and replied, "I can suppress 7th tier elites while at the 6th tier. So do you have any right to look down on me? Where is your courage coming from? Do you really think you can stop me? I can already rival you now. So it's only a matter of a few billion years before I can suppress all of you with a single hand. You might be growing more powerful, but are we not also growing more powerful?" Extermination sneered. Indeed, Extermination had been equally as powerful as Ling Han back then, and she was still equally as powerful as him now, even though he had already advanced in leaps and bounds. Perhaps Extermination's speed of advance could truly catch up to Ling Han's. "By the looks of it, you obtained many secrets from me at that time," Ling Han said. During his time in the central region of the Genesis world of the last era, he had been invaded by the world's will. Even though this had given him the ability to develop new dimensions, it was now clear that many of his secrets had been exposed to his opponent as well. Theoretically speaking, Extermination shouldn't have been able to replicate his footsteps even after learning of his secrets. This was because he had completed all of his foundations while still at the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Yet, Extermination had surprisingly managed to grow stronger at an incredible pace. Hang on. As long as one obtains the ability to develop new dimensions, they'll be able to slowly manifest new dimensions, even if they only started off with one. Given enough time, won't they also be able to reach the same level as the Genesis world? And just how powerful was Extermination to begin with? However, she most likely hadn't transformed into a dimension, so how was she able to suppress 7th tier ultimate elites as well? Perhaps she had also followed the same path as Ling Han and gathered the power of countless dimensions while still at the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier? And this had allowed her to manifest the embryo of a Genesis world in her body. Perhaps her abilities hadn't been as insane as Ling Han's back then, and she had only possessed 100 or 200 dimensions. After obtaining the secret of nurturing new dimensions from Ling Han, however, a new door to power had been opened up for her. "It's a shame that I wasn't able to obtain all of your secrets," Extermination said with a sigh. "Otherwise, would I have left you alive until today?" Ling Han finally understood why the World's Will had told him to join forces with Extermination at that time. It had said that this was the only way for them to defeat Hysteria. In reality, it was trying to convince Ling Han to reveal his hidden secrets to Extermination. However, Extermination had been forced to compete with Ling Han for the sake of the secret codes of life, and this had allowed Ling Han to discover some clues and guess the true identity of the World's Will. It was none other than Extermination herself. Otherwise, Ling Han still had yet to reach the 5th tier at that time, and it would have been useless even if he had reached the 5th tier. He would have been completely unable to rival Extermination, even after taking into account his ability to travel through dimensions. It was extremely likely that Extermination could have seized an opportunity to kill him. After all, Extermination was far more powerful than Chong Yen and the others. "What's this got to do with Hysteria?" Ling Han asked. "Why should I tell you?" Extermination replied coldly. Whoosh! Hysteria swung a tentacle and charged over. Even though it was confused as to why its predecessor was helping it, was there any reason not to take advantage of this situation? "I'll stop him. You do what you have to do," Extermination said as she engaged in an intense battle with Ling Han. She was truly no weaker than Ling Han. Not only was her power immense, but she could even channel heavenly venerable seals. She was much like a second Ling Han, one that could entirely rival him. Everyone with a battle prowess at the 7th tier was engaged now, meaning that there was no one left to stop Hysteria. Boom! Hysteria seized this opportunity to counterattack, furiously attacking cities and engulfing land. In just a day's time, it reclaimed all of the lands that it had lost to Ling Han. With no 7th tier ultimate elite to stop him, it continued to charge forward at an increasing speed. Ling Han ignored Extermination and charged at Hysteria. However, Extermination immediately caught up to him again. The two of them were at a similar power level, so neither of them could easily run away from the other. Just Extermination alone was able to stop Ling Han. Of course, the inverse was also true, and Ling Han could also stop Extermination. In any case, the prerequisite to all this was the fact that Hysteria was powerful enough. Otherwise, if it were someone like Chong Yen, Ling Han could send them flying to heaven new, where with a single strike. Hysteria was indeed slightly affected by Ling Han's attacks. However, this was still nowhere enough to stop its advance. Ling Han, abandon your futile struggles and welcome the arrival of a glorious age. Extermination said. Her battle with Ling Han was genuinely meaningless. He couldn't wound her, and she couldn't wound him either. Neither of them was able to gain an advantage over the other. Thus, Extermination was clearly unwilling to engage in this battle any longer. Even if she wanted to kill Ling Han, it wouldn't be right now. Humph! Allowing Hysteria to engulf the Genesis world is your so-called glorious age? Ling Han retorted coldly. Have you forgotten what I told you before? Extermination asked with a proud voice. The 8th type of power is antithesis. After comprehensive destruction, what will follow is a flourishing world filled with even more life and vitality. What kind of new life will the destruction of the Genesis world bring? Ling Han questioned calmly. Such pathetic sympathy. Extermination scoffed in a cold voice. After reaching our level, is there still any need to care about those ants? Ling Han, we can join forces to break out of this small pond. No need. Ling Han replied in rejection. Then drown in the furious tides of time. Extermination said. She continued to engage with Ling Han, preventing him from charging over to obstruct Hysteria. The other ultimate elites were also fighting with each other, and this was yet another similarly meaningless battle. None of them suffered any wounds, and none of them were even shedding a single drop of blood. Only Hysteria continued to furiously advance. Ling Han furrowed his brows. With Extermination and the others stopping them, they would have no way of breaking free to stop Hysteria. What could they do? Leave! He suddenly exclaimed, using his divine sense to deliver this message. If this continued, the end result could only be them looking on helplessly as Hysteria engulfed the Genesis world bit by bit. If they left now, however, Ling Han would at least still have the opportunity to cultivate and grow stronger. Moreover, if they didn't do anything about this, it wouldn't be long before Hysteria reached the profound negative realm, where Ling Han and Lin Luo's friends and families were located. Thus, their best option right now was to retreat. Lin Luo and the others were all 7th tier heavenly venerates, people who understood when to advance and when to retreat. They made up their minds in a split second, and they immediately dashed over to gather with Ling Han. Chapter 3070 3070 Retreat. Chapter 3070 3070 Retreat. 3070 Retreat. Ling Han and the 7 ultimate elites retreated. Extermination and the others didn't give chase. They were all at the 7th tier, and they were all indestructible and undying, so what difference would it make even if they caught up? They simply needed to guarantee that Hysteria could continue to advance. When Ling Han and the others retreated from the main battlefield, the elites fighting on the secondary battlefield also flew over. They had no option but to do so. Following the fall of the main battlefield, Hysteria continued to charge forward and move onto the secondary battlefield. Thus, how could these ordinary heavenly venerates stop the charge of a transcendent dimension? They naturally had no option but to retreat. The last time they had performed a full-scale retreat was when Hysteria had triggered a devastating storm of energy. Now, less than one epoch later, they were forced to perform another full-scale retreat. Just what was going on? Hadn't Ling Han joined the battle already? Why were they still being forced to retreat? Lin Luo revealed the reason, and this instantly caused deep astonishment and puzzlement to appear on everyone's faces. What was Extermination trying to do? In any case, it was somewhat understandable that Extermination was joining forces with Hysteria. After all, one of them was the past life, and one of them was the present life. Extermination's body had developed a new consciousness, and it wouldn't be surprising if this new consciousness had been affected by her old one. However, what had gotten into Chong Yen and the others? They had come from the Genesis world of the last era, so they clearly understood the fundamental nature of Extermination and Hysteria. That being the case, why were they still willing to join forces with them? No one was able to understand this. In the end, they could only explain it by saying that Chong Yen and the others had been bewitched. The problem was they were indestructible and undying 7th tier heavenly venerates. So how could they possibly be bewitched? Retreat first, Ling Han commanded. There was already no way to turn the tables now, especially since there were 2 supreme 7th tier ultimate elites on Hysteria's side. Meanwhile, he was the only one on their side. In terms of ordinary 7th tier ultimate elites, both sides had the same number. That being the case, how could they possibly block Hysteria? This was unless more 7th tier elites rushed over to help them. Even then, they would only be able to slow Hysteria down by a little. Everyone fell back in retreat. Judging by the situation, it was inevitable that Hysteria would engulf the profound negative realm. How quickly it did so was entirely dependent on how quickly it could engulf things. And after Hysteria engulfed this transcendent dimension, how would Ling Han still be able to block it? They needed to pack their things and make some necessary preparations. That way, they would be able to immediately retreat when they were faced with insurmountable danger again. Ling Han parted ways with Lin Luo and the others. They all had their own families, so they naturally needed to find a safe place for them first. Only after this could they discuss their next steps. They needed to decide whether they would defend the profound negative realm or retreat to the next realm. Ling Han mulled over this as he walked. The first question was why Chong Yen and the others had defected to Hysteria. Since 7th tier elites were indestructible and undying, this naturally couldn't be because they were afraid of death. Instead, Hysteria had definitely promised them some benefits. However, what benefits could they receive from doing this? The answer most likely lay in the world's core that Extermination had made up. Ling Han didn't believe it, but this didn't mean that Chong Yen and the others didn't believe it. They had most likely been told that they could advance to the 8th tier after obtaining the world's core. In addition to this, they had probably been enticed by the idea of breaking out of this small pond as well. These 7th tier elites, people standing at the pinnacle of the world, were presumably very attracted to this idea. This was especially the case since they had already battled against Extermination for so long before this. Would they not feel exhausted both physically and mentally after all this time? After arriving in this new Genesis world, they no longer had any friends or family to take care of or share time with. There was nothing for them to feel attached to. At the same time, many 7th tier elites also viewed all matter beneath them as nothing more than mere ants. That being the case, it was no surprise that they joined forces with Hysteria. Perhaps there was one additional reason on top of all this. That was, they had suffered great humiliation at the hands of Ling Han, so they wanted to borrow Hysteria's power to exact revenge. Forget about it. These 7 people were only minor characters in the scheme of things, so it wasn't important why they had decided to defect to Hysteria. When the time came, Ling Han would simply suppress them with a single hand. The most critical factor was extermination. What was her true identity? After obtaining the secret of manifesting new dimensions from him, her battle prowess had been allowed to grow to a terrifying level. Moreover, she was intent on jumping out of this so-called small pond. Hang on. Ling Han's eyes suddenly lit up. If extermination is genuinely the same as me, then her being at the 7th tier should allow her to elevate a dimension to the transcendent level as well. At that time, she would possess enough power to suppress me. However, this didn't happen. Extermination is at the 7th tier, and she's also someone who's lived for heaven knows how many years. Being as freakish as she is, she most likely possesses no fewer heavenly venerable seals than me, either. She was further in possession of a group of dimensions before, so her cultivation speed is definitely no lower than mine as well. So, she's in possession of a transcendent dimension, yet she was still only able to rival me, but not surpass me. What does this signify? She definitely possesses fewer dimensions than me. In other words, she didn't obtain the ability to manifest new dimensions. The glimmer in Ling Han's eyes grew brighter and brighter. If his speculation was correct, then extermination's ability to rival him was because she possessed a transcendent dimension inside her. In other words, she had a qualitative advantage over him. However, once Ling Han advanced to the 7th tier, he would also be able to raise a dimension inside him to the transcendent level. Or he could choose to raise more dimensions into high-tier, high-level dimensions. In any case, he could definitely regain his advantage. This is definitely the case. Otherwise, it will genuinely be impossible to stop hysteria. He returned to his ancestral grounds, and those under the heavenly venerable tier were all drawn into the celestial guest residence by him. This was a heavenly venerate tool, and the space inside it was so large that it could rival a low-level dimension. As for the Empress, Hunyeo, the karmic life heavenly venerable, and the others, they all sat around Ling Han as they listened to him explain the situation. They were heavenly venerates, so it wouldn't be too difficult for them to flee and stay alive as long as they didn't directly challenge hysteria or experience the comprehensive collapse of the Genesis world. What? They were shocked and petrified by what Ling Han told them. If news of this got out, it would definitely cause immense commotion to sweep throughout the entire Genesis world. It would cause everyone to freeze with fear, feeling as if doomsday were about to arrive. The karmic life heavenly venerable frowned and asked, "Why are they doing this?" "This isn't important anymore," he replied. "The most important thing is how we can stop these bastards." Everyone nodded in agreement. What would it matter even if they understood the reason behind Chongyan and the others' betrayal? Could that change the current situation? Ling Han pondered for a moment and said, "I'll discuss this with Lin Luo and the others first. In fact, I've already drawn all of my clan members into the celestial guest residence already, so you guys may as well come along with me as well." Before coming here, he had already agreed with Lin Luo and the others to meet up at the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan after dealing with his personal matters. Even though there was no one left to obstruct hysteria, it was a dimension after all, so it could only engulf the land bit by bit. Thus, the profound negative realm was safe for the moment. However, this period of safety might only last for 1 billion years. Or perhaps it would even be as short as 100 million years. Ling Han led the others to the Lin clan. Xian Fu and Bai Fan had already arrived, and Zhou Heng and Chu Hao were naturally present as well since they were Lin Luo's disciples, and their ancestral grounds were also right next to each other's. They were only waiting on Wu Jihong and Blood Rainbow. After waiting for a dozen or so days, the two remaining 7th tier heavenly venerates finally arrived. The 8 most powerful men in the world sat down, surrounded by their disciples and descendants, all of them heavenly venerates. They quietly listened to the discussion of the 8 ultimate elites. In light of our current situation, what suggestions does everyone have? Lin Luo asked. He was the owner of this ancestral ground, so he was naturally playing host to this meeting as well. Those bastards! Bai Fan cursed as he slammed the table. His formidable aura seeped out, causing the heavenly venerates in the surroundings to become pale. They felt agonizing pain on their skin, and it was as if they were about to explode.